I would like to call the meeting of the Deschutes County Board of County Commissioners to order Wednesday, February 7th, 2024. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, citizen input. Do we have anything, Brenda? Stephen, are there any raised hands? No? Okay. Okay. We're sure no citizen input. That's very unusual. All right. Well, great then. Let's go on to our consent agenda.
I'll move approval of consent agenda this morning.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, so we come to item number 5, our South County groundwater protection update from Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. So you may join us if you want to come up, and thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Todd.
You're welcome.
So good morning, Commissioners. Greg Sweeland with Oregon Department of Environmental Quality and the Regional Solutions Program. Thanks, first of all, for inviting us to talk about groundwater in South County. Before I came in here this morning, I was talking to David Anderson, who is our hydrogeologist, cleanup manager, and he was saying when 9/11 happened on that day, he was down on the pine collecting groundwater samples and installing bores down there. So this is 25 years or more that we've had concerns about this region. I think in 25 years, we still will have concerns about this region. And, you know, we're one partner in this problem down there, and we wanted to talk with you and keep this front of mind for the commission. And it certainly is for DEQ, and we're looking for more involvement and discussion around this issue. We believe that there's enough nitrate contamination kind of in the system right now to be a considerable problem in the decades to come. And just because those ramifications may be out there a ways in the future, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it and come together to see what can be done in the near term to make that a little bit better of a situation when it does happen.
When what happened?
Sure.
So,
well, when we reach a situation where we have significant public health concerns because of nitrate levels in a very large swath of land out in South County. There's a couple of things that, you know, DEQ has been doing recently. When you look at the recommendations that came out of the steering committee about like 8 or 9 years ago now, most of those, you know, involved multiple partners coming together to do things. There were a couple of those specifically that are more in DEQ's court. So I wanted to let you know that really around the monitoring and the funding, we've made some strides. There's money that is now available through Craft 3, which came through DEQ and involves potential for up to $15,000 for repair replacement of systems. That's depending on homeowner eligibility for those repairs or replacements and the availability of funds. But, you know, DEQ did capitalize Craft 3 and also had state on-site grants, which COIC locally has been distributing, that is available to these residents, although it's not specific for that geographic region. And so I guess the point that I wanted to make was that, you know, DEQ has heard the calls for more homeowner assistance when it comes to septic systems for failings, repairs and replacement of those systems. And really statewide, we have taken that into account and developed programs to supplement that. So there's a lot of history here. There's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of partners potentially involved. But again, I welcome the conversation today and appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Greg, I think you were at my neighbor's house a while ago on Edmondson doing you were going to do some testing of a well there. So anyway, I've heard good things about you, but you're saying 15,000 per septic system upgrade is what DEQ has?
So DEQ funds Craft Three, and Craft Three gives out, they give out funding for homeowners to do repair and replacement of septic systems. And DEQ has taken some federal dollars and recapitalized Craft Three. One of the things that they have done, partly in consultation with us when we've expressed the need statewide for homeowner assistance, is they have put up to $15,000 into basically a grant, you can call it, but it's called principal forgiveness. And so there's the potential for up to a homeowner to receive up to $15,000 through Craft Three. And again, that's dependent on the ability of the homeowner to apply. There's some conditions there, but and also the availability of funding. But that money is available for homeowners statewide. Yes.
Well, I've been told that we have, like, according to my notes from our last meeting, 7,000 wells that could be in that situation. And so that's like over $105 million.
It's a lot of money.
Yes. And that's 15,000, and the systems I was quoted are more like 40,000 a system. I don't know, Todd, are my numbers close?
So the prices of the systems have gone up significantly in the last few years in particular. We have the groundwater funding as well from the Groundwater Protection Fund from the new neighborhood that we provide rebates on repairs as well, which is right now it's $3,750. The funds for that program are running very low at the moment, so they replenish when development occurs in the new neighborhood. That could play in with some of these funds. Craft Three provides some of the funding through their clean water loans. COIC's provided some grants through the COSAP program. And then Neighbor Impact has provided loans as well in the past. So,
But they don't have any funding right now, though, do they?
not currently.
No, I didn't think so. Okay.
For folks who might just be tuning in on this and watching today, it would be helpful to kind of really help to understand what kind of impacts we're talking about. Could you review for us what concentrations of nitrates we're seeing in groundwater and at certain depths in South County right now? What levels are a health concern, and what kind of health concerns high nitrate concentrations could cause?
You go first.
Morning, Commissioners. Sean Rochette with Department of Environmental Quality. I'm the on-site program manager for the state. So I guess the first thing to mention about the nitrate levels would be what the drinking water standard or limit would be, 10 milligrams per liter. I would say that it's highly variable what the sampling results are in specific areas of South County. We have some that are non-detect, or actually many that are non-detect. And then there are some areas that may exceed that drinking water limit on nitrate. So it's kind of a function of where you're at, the density of development, the depth of your well. There's a lot of factors that go into that. What we do know is from the USGS modeling that was done is that they do expect a slow migration of the nitrate that's already in the system and continuing to be added from septic systems to go deeper and into those wells that are deeper. Some of the newer wells, however, are being placed, even deeper than they have in the past. And so those are going to be more protected, at least longer, more decades into the future here.
And what are the health impacts of nitrate exposure or continued ingestion of nitrate contaminated water?
Right. So the primary concern would be, the common term blue baby syndrome. So infants would be most susceptible to that.
And when we had our meeting, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, you said that part of the testing wasn't done yet. I think you said you're still looking for like 40 data for the 40 to 50. Has that been completed now?
No, it has not. The current status of sampling, our lab, DEQ lab, did about 60 wells. last year. And then they did another 20 as recent as October. And due to some short resources, they had to push back the rest of that additional sampling event. So I believe this spring is when they're targeting an additional 40 wells or so.
So on that topic of well testing, I've been holding on to this map for the last 10 years in my office, and I know that there's 3 dates that have been, published on some of these wells. Not all the wells. We're not going to always go back to the same well, but there's a subset of wells that have been tested over time, and I'm really looking forward to, seeing the updated numbers. I know that there's a community effort in partnership with DEQ and the residents of the area, and one of the recommendations was let's get a point in time every 10 years or so, which was probably 2 years ago now, is a 10-year window. And I have been an advocate, when you say resources are limited, Deschutes County, knowing that this is an issue, I've been in a spot a few times where I'm offering, can we write a check? Can we be a partner here? Can we make something happen? And the response is, well, no, we're going to do it internally and we'll get to it when we get to it. And then you say, well, we don't have the resources. So kind of a catch-22 that we're not getting those numbers published, because that would be valuable for the citizens. As I say, that subset of wells that was looked at from 1995, early in 2000, and I think 2011 was the third set. Let's put another data point on there if we can. And I'd be very supportive of that effort. As I say, if the resources are the issue, let's have that discussion and see what we can do about that. Well, and also I would acknowledge, I understand you're the, on-site person in the area, and Greg, you're the DEQ representative, but then we got the letter from, from Shannon Davis, and then there's the water quality manager at the division administrator, Jennifer Weigel, and then the director, so we've got multiple layers of DEQ here also. So thanks for coming today. We need to have this discussion. We want to protect good groundwater. We want to know that people are drinking safe water also. So there is a need to do this, to keep an eye on this also. But it's awkward to get a letter saying, well, let's go. Somebody needs to do something. So, that's where we can start that trajectory. Hey, who's going to do what? So that would be the step that we would want to take here. The other map is that large, study area that's been published many times, and it does go from Sun River all the way down into northern Klamath County also. So it's that geographic area. And we all understand highly draining volcanic soils, high water table, maybe a little bit lower in the last few years, but I'm a true believer that we'll have wet years too that bring the water level back. So, this is the time where maybe it is going to, evolve on us quicker, just fits and starts over the time with, the water supply. So yeah, just putting it in perspective a little bit here.
Yeah, I think it's clear that this is a slow moving train, but slow moving trains can still crush people. And this would be a great time to shift to the discussion of what we will be doing together. DEQ and the county, I'm newer to the action on this than some of my fellow commissioners. But from everything I've gathered, there's quite a bit of history, quite a bit of history of work on DEQ's part, quite a bit of history of work on the county's part, and quite a bit of history of work together. And understanding that just with the concentrations of nitrate that we have in the ground right now, not to mention anything we'll be adding in coming years, we will have some significant contamination and health problems in the future. It's an opportunity for us to reflect on what has been done, because some things have been done, but to also acknowledge that those things are probably not enough. It's becoming clear that all the septic upgrades we've done, that's good, but even a modern septic system doesn't eliminate nitrates from what it discharges into the ground. All the sewering that's been done in Lapine, it's wonderful that there are that many homes that are on a sewer system instead of on septic systems out in our community. There's been a lot of things done, but we still need to do more. And as we look toward that, I think we're going to get into the nitty gritty of some of the recommendations and the points that we need to consider together moving forward. But as we look toward that, I just want to say I hope that we at the county can be active, good partners in this process. In the history, I know that it seems like some people feel like the county, back in the day, 10, 12, 15 years ago, back in the day, the county was more out front and took more of the arrows for trying to do things to address this problem. I don't know if that's an accurate assessment, but rather than saying, oh, well, we stood out in front before, so now you have to stand out in front, DEQ. I would say it would present a much better picture to the community if we stood side by side and shared leadership in addressing these issues. So that's just kind of some framing thoughts for getting into the nitty gritty to-do list to address this problem.
Todd, according to my notes, with the technology we have today, it's a 70% reduction of nitrates. Is that about right?
Yes, the current system that's approved that we use when it's set up in nutrient removal mode based on testing, it's 70 in that range of about 70% reduction of loading. So for every one of those, we reduce it. It's a significant reduction, but it's not all the way down to safe drinking water levels.
Right.
And so for every 4 new residences that we put in for, a new system, it's an equivalent load of, a conventional system. It's kind of the way to think about it.
And Todd, I know that there are between the state and the county, there are variances being secured for people who want to build their home on their piece of property in shallow groundwater areas in the county. Is the effectiveness of an ATT or advanced septic system as good, 70% in that setting, in that variance setting, or is it not as good?
Some of those neighborhoods are more sensitive to additional loading, and based on the USGS information, there's no capacity in some of those neighborhoods to protect the water without, honestly, we need to upgrade all the existing residences, not add additional load. So the variances are adding additional load above that capacity. These systems do treat to a very high level. There are areas where some of the variances have been denied because the site conditions are so poor and the connectivity to surface waters or other areas are a concern for other reasons. The nutrient removal occurs through that treatment process. What doesn't happen is once it's discharged into the ground, into the groundwater, there's not really further reduction in that nitrogen significantly. So it's very small quantity. So what we're adding is going to accumulate in the aquifer. So one of the things that's occurred through these variances is some new, more innovative designs that are approved that are outside of the rules, right? And Sean has been involved with a lot of these. And we're permitting those systems. There's only been one installed currently that I can think of, but there's a few that have amendments that it's similar to some of the systems, or trying to utilize some of the same technology that we tested during the Lapine project that was very successful and removed up to 90 to 95% of the nitrate. So that's a benefit, but they're still in areas where, according to the best science, we don't have capacity to sustain the water below 7 milligrams per liter, which is the action level in state drinking water, state resource protection standards.
I guess, following on the line of thought of what is going on with these variances, could between county staff and DEQ, can you describe to us, how many variances are being granted nowadays, and kind of how that, kind of what the steps are in someone getting to a variance. And the reason I'm asking is because I want to be clear on whether this is something that needs to be addressed, and whether we should be granting as many variances as we are, and if not, then how do we close that opportunity down?
I think I'll take this one, having been the variance officer for the last 4 years or so in this area. Commissioner Chang, that's a great question, and a great point to bring up. That I believe that, just seeing the sheer number that have been approved over the years, there has been an increased concern on our side about how many are being approved, but also the quality of the approval, or the proposals themselves of the variances. We're seeing a lot more severe lots that are being applied for. So when I say severe, typically that means wetter lots, shallower groundwater. So as a result of that, we have seen denials and an increase in the number of denials in the last couple of years. Along with that, we have seen some improvements in technology that has been proposed. But like Todd mentioned, those technologies are not prescriptively approved by DEQ. So DEQ has an approved technology list. I think a good point to bring up along, that topic there is that we could potentially get better technologies in this state, but really it's up to manufacturers to come to DEQ for a product approval. There are technologies that exist, in this nation that do better than what we have currently on our approved lists.
Well, as I think I mentioned, I grew up in Morrow County, and we see what's happened in Morrow County with the ignoring of the nitrate situation on a horrific level. So definitely, what does it take then for someone to get their apparatus approved by the state? I mean, you would think that would be high on the list.
Right. And what I've told many folks that have asked just that question is, it's up to these manufacturers if they think there's a market for it. They're in it to make money, right? So we don't control who comes through the door. We just review their applications for product approval. But yeah, it would be great if somebody else came in with the technology that we could put on our approved list and treat to a higher standard in these sensitive areas.
So Todd, you were saying perhaps up to 95%?
That's with the upflow filter with wood chips. Essentially, it was tested as a Nitrex unit in the Lapine project. There are other technologies potentially as well. And I've spoken with some representatives of companies in the past. When we were working on the Lapine project and the local rule, we were trying to encourage all comers, basically. The part of this is they go through an NSF testing component as well. That's part of that. Again, there's requirements for operation and maintenance and certified installers. So they have to have an investment as well, in the distribution of their technologies, not just getting them listed. For us as installers, as regulators, we understand what's necessary when these systems are installed. The installers can learn that technology. So there's a significant investment from the manufacturers to do this. And I've spoken to a number of them about the potential for their products here, right? So I've done my best to try to say that there is an issue here and we would permit them, if they were approved. Part of that also goes into discussions about potential, additional rulemaking with DEQ, which we had some discussions a few years ago for a treatment standard 3 system, which would be a nutrient removal component that might help facilitate more companies coming into Oregon with these kinds of systems. So that hasn't occurred yet, but those discussions have occurred in the past. So.
Is there a state or two that that has these systems in it?
There's an issue around Chesapeake Bay I think that they've done some of these kinds of systems. In the past, we had talked to some of the test facilities in Rhode Island, along the coastal areas, things like that.
Okay.
Some of the technologies we use, the Orenco system that is a common system, is an internationally used product.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, just kind of continuing to explore this variance question. If I understand correctly, slowing the rate that of approvals for these variances will help us keep the problem from accelerating. But it is existing septic systems that are out there that are continuing to add nitrates into the ground at certain rates right now. I mean, is that an accurate way to think about this? And I mean, and if that's the case, then it's good to not accelerate the problem by granting more variances, but we also really need to have a very serious focus on the existing systems that are out there.
Yes, I would say that's accurate, that for lack of better terms, the big polluters are the older existing systems that have not been retrofit to achieve the, at least 70% reduction that we have available today with current technologies.
Right.
And that number is 7,000. Something.
Approximately.
Yeah.
And to add to that, I was looking up the number of systems that have been repaired and upgraded. It was my brain was way off in my guess. It's not as many as I had hoped. It's only about 280 systems. So out of all those thousands of residences out there, it feels like we've done more. Perhaps because when you redevelop a property, the permit's not a repair, right? So it's an upgrade, though. Still could be an upgrade of an existing system. I didn't count those. I just looked at repairs.
So 280 in how long of a period?
Since 2006, which is disappointing. Yeah.
And thank you for serving in Deschutes County for 25 years, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. We do appreciate you.
So to tie in with the whole retrofit idea, that was a big component of the local rule in the past. That was because we recognized that was an issue. So that was part of the new neighborhood and the whole pollution reduction credit idea. We were trying to generate funding to help existing property owners upgrade their systems and get to that sooner rather than later. And the longer those systems load to the system, the more of that load we're going to have to deal with in the future.
Well, and today we're probably at a tipping point where the new neighborhood, the land that's been transferred from BLM to the county, now that's inside the city, the county still has the title, the development pressure on that is going to be proceeding. It's like there's going to be neighborhood developments, which means we're going to put a lot of money in the groundwater protection fund. So that means Deschutes County proper will have a bank account. We'll be able to make some financial choices on that. Financial advisory committee with the residents is one of the actions that we can take. I think of this as Deschutes County proper. We're following the rules and the laws of the state of Oregon as defined by DEQ. We're doing the DEQ program, so we need DEQ clear leadership on this for what we need to do. The local rule obviously was the exciting time 2008 and 9 that got a lot of people up in arms on this. So there's some history there. But we need to protect good groundwater. So that would be the common point for everything. Deschutes County will have financial resources to help with this. In fact, so I wonder, what's the thought by DEQ right now? Where are we going with this? We're implementing a DEQ state program, by having our on-site program here, but it's the DEQ rules. So yeah,
Commissioner, it's a good question. I think, historically, as we've talked about solutions, they fall into basically three categories. And one is looking at longer term, a community wastewater system. One is looking at a community drinking water system. And then the other is doing everything the state can to enhance funding opportunities for homeowners to replace older systems.
I agree with all those.
Right. And the one that we can immediately act on today and have over the last couple of years is we have made strides, like I mentioned, in getting money to homeowners for this. 5-10 years ago, there was very little money for homeowners. There was low interest loans, often which even at low interest rates were not particularly affordable. And so we have made strides there. And that is really, from DEQ's perspective, that is the bucket that we can act on kind of on our own to address this issue. And I think when you talk about the other solutions that are more longer term, we need partners and local support with advancing any of those. And it's not our primary role. You were talking about a public health system. We need Oregon Health Authority involved in that. And so we are doing everything we can on the funding side, and we are looking for your input and a coalition of partners perhaps to more comprehensively address this, and we're ready to do that. I don't know what the immediate next step is, but that's part of this conversation, is to see where you might want to go and start planning out some of those longer term items and getting those partners to address this on a more long-term basis.
Well, let's talk about that. So local financial support, working backwards from the three you mentioned, and then water systems. And water systems are allowed in the rural counties. So somebody could put in a water system, protect drinking water. When you turn the faucet on, it's safe. That doesn't resolve the groundwater loading issue. We all know we live in a nitrogen limited system. If there's nitrogen going in the river per se, it's going to turn green and it's going to not be good. So we live in a nitrogen limited system. So then you get back to goal 11, septic sewer systems in the rural area, which we've gone down that path, haven't we? So this DLCD staff put together in partnership an application defining, okay, well, in some certain areas, referring to this study area, let's authorize, sewer systems. Of course, the land use system, the appeals process, approvals and denials, put it in a spot where, okay, well, that mountain's too tall to climb. So we have a state agency saying we need to protect water, and we have a state agency that says, well, we're not going to let you do that exactly. And somebody's going to appeal it because that's the land use advocacy organizations, which is fine. But that's two state agencies and we get stuck in the middle. So that's something we need to maybe talk about up front. How do we be a partner in this and not take all the arrows and have two agencies? Well, we're number one priority. We're number one priority. Okay, fine. Two state agencies putting us in a terrible spot, which is something we can talk about. That'll be action. And it's probably a little bit higher level than all of us, right? If we want to protect the environment, then that's going to be leadership. It's going to be leadership from the department directors or the governor's office saying, we can't both be number one priorities, folks. Let's do number one and number two. Let's prioritize these efforts.
Actually,
I would say that rather than looking up above for somebody to solve our problems, the opportunity to successfully navigate a goal 11 exception through the needle is going to require a whole lot of local leadership. The way that we craft an application, the people that we work with to make sure that it works for all the interests concerned, will determine the success of an application for a goal 11 exception. And that is our job.
Yeah. And I would disagree. I mean, we've already been down that path. Why would we stand in the middle between two agencies that are just like, no, I'm number one. No, I'm number one.
Because I've heard all the history on the past goal 11 exception effort. And I think it could have been done better.
Yeah. So
and I know we need to work together. I've had this on my desk. We actually had a meeting May of 22, and they said that fall the wells were going to be tested. That was 2022. Shannon Davis was here in the room. I thought it was great. And I worry because, I see what's happened in Boardman, and I keep worrying what is going on in Deschutes County. You're saying that the problems are just continuing, not on a great level, but it's not good. And it's the long term that we're really worried about. And this 7,000 wells that we've only fixed 280 of them are
The septic systems.
yes, the septic systems. Well, and then the water goes down into drinking water. So yeah, no, we really need to step on this. And I'm more than happy to work with you guys. The more funding we can get. When I first calculated 40,000 a system, the 280 million is overwhelming. So we've got to figure out a more financially feasible way to do it. And if we need to bring in systems that are actually at 95%, I think it's critical. And I would think that some people in your office and maybe in our office can help facilitate bringing companies into the state that will help us with our nitrate issue. I mean, definitely Boardman should have hit the national news and what's happened to those people. So we don't want that here.
Well, is there any clarity on Morrow County and Boardman? Because we don't have commercial agriculture. We don't have big industrial disposal needs, so we have residential septic systems. So I don't have a feel for, is this equate to that scenario or not?
So, Commissioner, I think you're referring to the groundwater management area designation. It's appropriate for some areas and some areas it's not. I would consider South Deschutes more of like a pre-GWAMA or a pre-groundwater management area. The situation that you're referring to is quite different in a number of ways, with the sources of that. And also I'd point out that really the point of the GWAMA is to get agencies, locals, all the affected partners working together collectively to address something long-term. And I think that we have had that without the GWAMA designation. We have a long history of doing that work.
And I'm referring to, we don't have the same scenario. We don't have industrial farming, industrial production with huge nitrate loads that need to be dispersed. The plan was to put it over the farmland. And now, that's a different scenario than our number of septic systems, is my point. I mean, I just think that's another level of management that we don't have. We have on-site systems, but it's not to that same level is what, I don't know if you can confirm that or not. I just think of it like that.
No, I think that's right. And I think that when you have multiple levels of contamination coming from different parties, which you do up there, I mean, it's largely agricultural, but I think we have the pieces of a functioning GWAMA already now. We just don't have that designation. And I don't know that there would be any benefit to necessarily bringing that designation. I mean, we have the groups and the funding working together, and we only have one source of the contamination largely. And so
I just getting, just so we understand what I'm thinking here. We have commercial farmers that want to raise crops for a profit, and they're going to spend X amount of dollars on putting nitrogen in fertilizer form on the surface of the ground. And they have large industrial operations with tanker loads of high nitrate waste being dispersed on the ground. We don't have that here. We do have septic systems, but we just don't have that same kind of industrial load.
But what they had in that area, that was ignored.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm saying
I'm
this
just
was
separating the
22,
two.
and we should have gotten these results in like 22. It was on my desk. I kept going, where are
The well testing results,
right?
which
Yes.
is where I
And
started.
now they're not even done yet.
Yeah.
So I know I saw you, Peter, step up to the
That
desk.
is the really important thing to point out when we're talking about the Umatilla Basin and here. The sources of nitrates are different. The net results, high nitrate concentrations in the groundwater that are a threat to human health, are the same. And, kind of tying on to what Commissioner Adair just said, we may be at the point right now. I mean, we may have been at the point already in the past for Deschutes County where future residents who have no options to access clean drinking water point backwards in time and say, why didn't somebody do something about this? They saw this slow moving train for 25 years. Why didn't anyone do anything to protect me? And if we don't want to end up in that situation, if we don't want our legacy, our legacy during this period when the three of us are the commissioners of Deschutes County, if we don't want our legacy to be people cursing us in the future, then we need to take our responsibilities right now very seriously.
I'd like to hear from Peter, and I do take my responsibility seriously.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. as I know you've allocated approximately an hour to this topic, I think it's going to be helpful to the extent that the board is able to do this, is to articulate your expectations in terms of who's going to be leading the groundwater protection efforts going forward. And of course, Deschutes County is a partner in all of this. And the comments that I want to articulate are not to dictate how the board wants to potentially ask that question. And I should recognize that behind me is Bob Baggett, a retired Oregon Department of Environmental Quality specialist who was a partner for decades with Deschutes County, and grateful to see Bob here in an effort of support. One of the things that's in your packet that Todd and I prepared is a summary. It's not all inclusive of the efforts that Deschutes County in partnership with DEQ has undertaken for decades. And I think it is representative of in Deschutes County's case, in the Community Development Department's case, in terms of what we've been able to maximize to date. And Commissioner DeBonne recognized the Goal 11 exception. Those are huge hurdles to overcome. With all due respect to Commissioner Chang's remarks, I'm not confident a blanket Goal 11 exception can be accomplished based on the rules that are in place today. Now, if DEQ were to identify a sub area that warrants sewering at a sub area level, I think there's enough information in the LUBA decision that that was rendered in 2016 that holds some real promise. But I'm not confident that CDD is in a position to kind of restructure a blanket wide Goal 11 exception. I've had informal conversations with Central Oregon Land Watch. I didn't get any indication that they would somehow step aside to a blanket Goal 11 exception. And those are the rules that we have in the state. What CDD can leverage, and what with Todd's leadership and the leadership of his team and partnership with Sean, is when there's an addition or a retrofit or a failure, we can require existing homes to upgrade their septic systems. And Todd has been able to do that when those triggers have been met. Over time, we've talked about this, proceeds from the Newberry neighborhood. And I anticipate I'm optimistic in the next 12 to 24 months, there will be a major replenishment we have a groundwater partnership fund. For the people that are unaware, Deschutes County owns land in the city of La Pine. The sale of that land directly goes into a groundwater partnership fund. And when that fund is not healthy now, there's not a lot of money in it, but there is the real possibility to have 6-7 figures replenished in that fund if we can ever sell a quadrant or two. When that happens, I foresee Todd and I engaging the board, convening a financial advisory committee to begin talking about some of the items that Greg mentioned about how do you want to invest these funds to protect groundwater that's with input from the community. So those are two huge factors that I think will come into play. Our ability to provide resources to help people retrofit septic systems, or there's development circumstances that warrant existing residents to upgrade their systems. But in terms of what more CDD can do in terms of leading groundwater protection, I really want to put that back squarely before the three commissioners. I'm open. Of course, Todd and I are open. We want to be responsive to the board's directives. But I would just remind everyone that there was a reason why in 2008, 2009, that the Board of County Commissioners gave the program back to DEQ to lead groundwater protection. And, we want to be a partner, but I think if we, to the extent possible, I think it would be helpful for CDD and for DEQ to understand the board's expectations going forward, because their letter, as noted by all three commissioners, is significant. Doing nothing's not an option. If actions aren't taken over time, there will be significant, if not irreversible, impacts. And so having a sense of what your expectations are of us and a state agency, I think will be critically important going forward. And that's a lot to unpack right now, and it may not be appropriate at this meeting to kind of get into those issues. There may need to be a follow-up meeting, but this is a very important topic and something that I know DEQ and CDD and the Board of County Commissioners have recognized for some time. But any input that the board can offer going forward, I think will be incredibly helpful for us.
Peter, I just want to respond to your discussion of the Goal 11 exception concept and make it very clear. I'm not proposing that we try to run the exact same blanket Goal 11 exception that we ran over a decade ago. I don't think that is. I don't think that would go anywhere. But a modified effort, possibly focusing on a sub area, where a sub area where connection of hundreds of homes would make a huge difference. I think that's worth doing, and I would hope that we don't try to turn it into some kind of symbolic struggle with the state over the land use planning system. That we take the modest project that can have a really big impact that can be done, rather than trying to grandstand about the state land use planning system on this issue.
So let's take a moment and celebrate the Cagle neighborhood in the city of La Pine, though. So they're putting in a huge water system, water and sewer system, expanding their system, doubling their disposal capacity or more. So there's another little section in there that's being sewered, and it's going online as we speak. So remember, I mean, progress is being made in this area. I would, from my experience, I would ask DEQ to really take the lead on this. That's my thought process. A Goal 11 exception for a defined area for a specific purpose. I mean, we have private property owners in geographic areas that are going to be caught in the middle of this. And as I say, Peter just mentioned, it's a high standard to think we're going to get through a land use system. Pulling the property owners because they're not asking anymore. We had an OWW1 neighborhood that was generally ready to go years ago. Now there's variances in that area. So there's even less people that are asking for this because they've got theirs and they're moving on. So I would ask DEQ to be real clear on leadership on this.
Greg?
Well, and you may not have the authority for that today, but we're having this discussion.
Commissioner, I don't even know that it's a matter of authority. I guess what does that look like to you? Because I do want to seriously take these what I'm hearing and go back and see if that can come into some kind of policy development framework. But what exactly do you have in mind? I mean, you mentioned before, DEQ has authority of the groundwater, and I think that's true to one extent, and it's not true in another. I mean, our authority is fairly limited to we are approving variances or denying. That's a case by case basis. Largely, this contamination is already in the ground, and there is no easy way to get it out. And so, I'm curious what you want that to look like, because I think DEQ, like I said, is in a position to possibly lead this. I just don't know exactly what that looks like, because what Peter had mentioned with both of those, either a drinking water system, community wastewater system, if that's what you're talking about, those are local processes that are driven. I mean, DEQ assisted with some technical assistance in that application. We were not the drivers of that. The county and DLCD were. So I am interested in hearing what you want that to look like, because I just don't know that the answers are easy or
Well, I mean, just keep the communication going. As I say, Oregon Water Wonderland Unit 2, and that's the area, the confluence of the Deschutes, the Little Deschutes, Spring River, Fall River, Sun River area. Sun River's on sewer already. OWW2 built out their system for twice the capacity they're utilizing today. OWW1 is just another neighborhood area that was kind of the poster child for, yeah, maybe we should sewer this area. They're neighborhood association, and I think, it's all changed over in the last 10 years or so, was thinking about doing this. Well, how do we connect to this existing system? Remember, I mean, I was a contract farmer out at the 50-acre field at OWW2. They have a second 50-acre field with disposal capacity that's never even been utilized. So a big capital project has been put in place and it's never been utilized. I don't see that that's the authority or the requirement of Deschutes County, the Board of Commissioners, to go into a neighborhood association and say, because of this, you're going to do this. I mean, it's, from my point of view, it's a community need that, to protect groundwater. But unless there's rules at the state level, from the good of our heart, I don't see the Deschutes County going into some neighborhood and saying, you're going to sewer. I mean, that's millions and millions of dollars. So it's a partnership, though. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not part of this. We want to protect good groundwater, and we have resources to do it. We'll have dollars in the near future also. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of common ground here. It's just who's going to lead, who's going to follow.
I can speak to a little bit of that. So, some of those issues. So we're talking about causes, right? So the load from septic systems, which is the program through DEQ that we implement at the county level. We're an agent of the state for small flow systems, right? Not the big commercial systems. That's where the problem's coming from. So typically when you look at if we're going to decrease that load, we're going to upgrade systems, we're going to connect them to sewer, right? If that problem is developing and it's a risk to the, DEQ deals with the resource, but from a drinking water perspective, individual wells, there's no real regulation of people's drinking water wells, individual drinking water wells. But from community drinking water wells, that's through the health authority. So that would require, the health authority's involvement, probably looking at risk levels. Historically, I've never been involved. I remember from talking to Bob, I started in Klamath County. Bob worked in Klamath County years ago. There was a certain neighborhood in near Klamath Falls, where they did a sanitary survey to determine sewer failure rates or septic failure rates and risk to the public. And I can't recall, Bob told me a little bit about that, where you go out and you investigate the number of failures, and they declared it a health hazard and they required sewering at a certain percentage. I think that there's a health component to those kinds of surveys or risk assessments that's not within the on-site program's purview. We're dealing with that load, the creation of the contaminant, what kind of permitting we can do about it, the risk to people, and it is from that perspective, the impacts to the resource. But for people's drinking water, we don't regulate that. That's through the health department and through the state. So that would be, public water systems are regulated through, those programs at the state level. So that level of risk, if those people's drinking water is at risk and they need public water systems, the health authority would be involved. We would have to get water resources involved to know where those sources could be safe, if there's enough water to serve the area. All those factors are things that aren't really, we haven't really explored extensively, and that would take other agencies to be involved.
Well, and this letter is kicking off this cycle of conversation, right? So today, DEQ is coming to the Board of Commissioners to say, let's talk about this. Hasn't gone away. Let's figure out where we're going to go. So as I say, I'm a partner in this.
Todd, you're talking about engaging OHA more intensively in this process, and just kind of looking through our materials and looking around the room today, I don't see OHA. So it raises two questions for me. Number one, what is the process like to engage OHA? And number two, do we want to do that? I mean, I suspect that one of the reasons that we haven't engaged OHA yet is because declaring a health hazard, or or determining that a health hazard exists is potentially something that a community doesn't really want done for them. People if I was a property owner in a certain area, I would have real concerns about a health hazard being declared in my neighborhood. The folks in the neighborhood also need to look at the big picture and say, well, does a health hazard help us? Does a health hazard determination help us address the problem that is a threat to my family? And if it does, then maybe people can get there and be more comfortable with that, or actually appreciate the determination of a health hazard. But could you? I mean, I guess the first question, how do you engage OHA is for our panel, and the other question of, do we want to engage OHA? And have a health hazard determined for portions of South County? I think that's a question for the commissioners.
Well testing, right? Do we get back to that?
Well, to that point, there's a lot of, I think a lot of folks have been trying to hang their hat on well testing. The reality is that if you look at the way the study was done and the modeling, we don't expect that all the wells are going to show up contaminated today. We're talking about decades and decades and decades, and in some areas, maybe over 100 years. But, our job is to try to protect this resource for future beneficial use. So, just trying to hang your hat on what we have today from sampling is misleading. So I want to be clear about that.
Well,
That's
so
what you
I'm a
accept.
sitting commissioner with and I live in this area, and I have neighbors, and I talk to them when I go to the grocery store. So I say, what do I say? I say, oh, well, $10, $20, $40,000 coming down. We're going to save this area for the next generation. Is that the only answer we have here? I mean, are we responding to something tangible or not? So I'm just pointing out that puts me in a pretty weird spot.
Well, to respond to that, Commissioner, I could bring you and show you the data. There's literally thousands of data points that demonstrate that there's nitrates in the groundwater. Okay. This isn't just being predicted. It's actually happening. It was happening in 2005 when we finished sampling those shallow wells, sampling the systems. It happened at every site we tested a system. Okay. So it's not like a one-off here and a one-off there. Every single site where we had a test system, we had monitoring wells, there was nitrates in the groundwater coming from septic.
And I'm referring to the body of knowledge and the confidence of the residents in the area to know we're taking on this fight. That's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
But Todd, were those levels higher than the 7 to 10?
Some cases, yes.
Okay, because you said there
It
are
varied. It
Okay.
varied tremendously depending on, you also have to think about it. So one thing like Sean was just talking about, the model is looking at larger components of the aquifer. And we're looking at an individual well. An individual well isn't going to tell us it's not going to be the same as what that model tells us. It's not necessarily the average of a block of water, right, in the ground. And so that well could be anywhere from, 3 milligrams per liter to, I think the worst well sample we had was 180 milligrams per liter. So that range is tremendous, and that map with the little red dots on it is where a lot of those wells were. So
was that 180 just now, or was that
that was in probably
5?
between 2000 and 2005.
Okay.
And it had to do with just capturing the plume in that location. And what we learned is it was because there was an old pit privy upstream from that had been there for probably 100 years.
Well, and remember, I want to protect good groundwater, and we have resources to do it. So then it just puts me in that spot. What do I tell somebody at the grocery store? So I'm just saying that this is it. This is our conversation.
In terms of what to say to somebody at the grocery store, I mean, you go to any neighborhood in South County, and there's going to be people with varying depth wells. Would it be accurate to say to people, your well, based on the depth, might be okay right now and might be okay for some years to come, but one of your nearby neighbors with a shallower well is already experiencing contaminated drinking water. I mean, do we have the folks whose wells are already showing over 10 parts per million? Are those dispersed across wide areas of South County?
Well, I've never had somebody call me and say that they've had this scenario. And that's the catch-22 that I have. I've lived there for 20 years. I have residents in the area. This is a topic that I ran for office. I've never had somebody call me and say, my well is dangerous and I can't drink my water. So, I mean, let's not make that assumption. Let's get real clear on this.
But isn't it the problem?
I was
the water
asking-
Does not taste, it tastes sweeter or something? I thought.
Oh,
that
but
was-
it's tested for.
I was asking our panelists whether that would be an accurate statement or not. That there are a number of wells.
So I can do my best at trying to answer kind of how we've addressed that issue. So there have been wells that have tested high, and we have spoken to those people before.
So the well that tested at 180, what did you do with that well?
So that's a monitoring well that was part of the test system program when we had the Lapine demonstration project. It was a well that was drilled by DEQ as a monitoring well for a site where we were testing at one of our test systems, experimental systems. And we just happened to discover that they had an old pit privy near that. It's probably about the distance we are apart, but 25 feet down to the water table. So, that well was during that program, and it's on the property, I believe. But to go back to what Commissioner Chang was asking. So one of the things that we have done in coordination with DEQ prior to Sean being at the program, Bob coordinating with Bob and a DEQ hydrologist, they would look at risk assessments for specific areas based on real estate transaction data, monitoring well data that they had available, including depth of the well logs. So depths of water, where the oxic layer is, all these factors come into play about risk assessment. And so the hydrologist would say, yes, this neighborhood, this area is at risk, at moderate risk, low risk, or high risk. There's a very few areas that are low risk, and those have been exempted from the upgrade requirements. So most of these areas have been required to upgrade their ATT. It was what we were going through after the steering committee. And so there were some of these more localized assessments that were a hydrologist looked at that and said, yes, this is at risk. You should put in nitrogen limiting systems in this area. And in a few of those cases, that the hydrogeologist said the groundwater is already impacted in this neighborhood. So he did make those findings. So, looking at the data, and that's probably 10 years ago. That was 10 years ago when we did that.
How many areas is that? I mean,
it's the broad area has been determined to be at moderate or high risk in large portions of this area.
But when you said that there was, there were determinations that some of these areas, people were already had contaminated drinking water.
So
how many areas was that?
So it's a fairly broad area. It's mostly in the Day Road area, in that vicinity. Certain wells, a fairly large area with many homes. That was why we've been requiring the ATT systems in those areas.
So, depending on how you view who's your neighbor, I mean, I could say to people, your well, based on its depth, based on its circumstances, might be okay for, some years to come. You have neighbors whose drinking water is contaminated right now,
or could be. So the risk. It's all about risk assessment. It's impossible for us to predict what's going to happen with a specific well.
Okay.
But the fact that the risk could be 100 years out seems that we really need to do something today.
The load is in the system. The drinking water well, they're drinking older water. is essentially why their well's still safe.
So switch a little bit topic. So we have variances. Todd says, now this isn't going to fit. And then they go to a variance officer, ask, pretty please, I'd like to design my system to be super duper. And I want an approval for this. Are we in a spot where those variances are going to be slowed down, stopped? Is there a policy change? Is that something the county would ask for, or would you demand, or I don't, what does that look like?
That's a good question, Commissioner.
Well, thank you.
I am no longer I am a variance officer, but I am now the program manager for the state. So we have a new variance officer that will be coming in, who's going to be our lead on-site person for our Eastern region. You know, we don't have a specific policy for individual variances. We assess them individually is what I'm getting at. So it's really a function of the site conditions and the proposal itself. So, you know, in general, if I had to make some just generalizations about that, you know, the wetter the lot, and the further away from meeting the prescriptive standards and rule, the less odds of that, you know, site getting approved. We are also considering what management areas from that USGS study that these lots are in, and also even the size of the lot, development density. So there's a lot of factors. Some of these areas are more sensitive than others. Like Todd was saying, there's kind of these high, moderate, low risk areas. And we have had some proposals that are way above and beyond what our prescriptive standards include, or prescriptively approved products that are on the DEQ list. So it's hard to say what the future is, other than I can say we're more concerned. Absolutely. We don't want to contribute further to this problem. As Todd mentioned earlier, you know, 70% reduction, you know, takes 4 of those systems to equal one of those old existing systems that's still putting out a ton of nitrate into the system. So, you know, in some regards, retrofitting those existing systems is going to go a long ways in the long run. You know, we still have what's in the ground currently, and that's not going anywhere for, you know, decades or maybe even hundreds of years.
So yeah, there's no proposal right now for DEQ to change anything on the variance front.
No, it would undermine the entire process, I think, because the people of the state of Oregon have the right to, you know, propose or apply for a variance from any rule that we have in the Oregon administrative rules in our division. So they can do that, but, you know, they have to make that case as to, yeah.
So I do have a question, Sean. You said you're no longer the variance officer. There's a new one.
Yes.
Is that person been hired?
Yes.
Okay. So it's not like we have to wait for that person then.
No. This person has been with DEQ for 7-8 years already. I mean, if you're interested in the history, he's worked out of our Medford office for quite some time, and is relocating to the Bend area.
Okay. No, that's good to know, because it seems like, you know, I was talking 22, then we went through 23. So I just was hoping that we can actually address this issue when I would hope we could bring this back, and bring it back with maybe a few more people at the table. Did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Come on.
Oh,
up to the
please,
microphone.
and identify yourself.
Sorry. Hello, Bob. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
There's one key point from everything I've heard here this morning, and that is the public health aspect of this. There's a lot of talk about groundwater protection. DEQ is a environmental protection agency. They're not a public health agency. Todd and I, by profession, are public health officials. And so you just put us in that position that we're public health officials working for a non-public health agency. Been involved in this same issue for 30 years now. At one point in time, about 5-6 years ago, I had the Oregon Health Authority positioned to come into Deschutes County, take all the information that we had gathered from the groundwater study and everything, the $10.5 million of money that was spent, and do what would be called an environmental health assessment. In no way were they going to be declaring a health hazard. It was an assessment from a public health point of view, not from a groundwater protection point of view. And I really feel that that's the direction, that's where we need to go now. You, the county commissioner, are the local public health authority, and you have an ear when it comes to the Oregon Health Authority. And working with that agency, that assessment could happen. And what would come with that assessment would be a risk assessment. You've got different layers of groundwater down there, like Commissioner Chan has mentioned. Yes, people could drill deeper, but that would be much more expensive. However, if you take one well and drill it deeper, the cost isn't so prohibitive. You go down deeper, you get safer water that has less risk of having contamination in it. And at the same time, it's a public water supply, so that water is being monitored on a monthly and yearly basis. So this is public health protection. And so, and the next issue would be a feasibility study or what have you as to, okay, if we come up with $50 million to do something down in South County, what are we going to do? We're going to protect groundwater that is at high risk of all kinds of contamination, or are we going to put in public water supplies and provide safe drinking water for all? What's the best method to spending that money? And again, that's where the health authority would come in. And we've kind of put all this together. I mean, we've been beating our heads on this for 30 years now without the health authority. They really need to be a part of this situation. So.
Thank you so much for those comments. I appreciate it.
You know, just following those comments, I would flag that I think one to do that I would like to see county staff pursue is drafting up a letter from the Board of Commissioners as the local public health authority requesting that OHA conduct this environmental health assessment that they were poised to do it some years ago, but I guess didn't get done at the time.
Sounds like there's probably another story there. Okay. Todd, any final comments?
No, I mean, we were talking, I remember we met with someone from the health authority and showed them around the area, and that was probably 10 years ago. So I don't know, again, much like what we keep seeing, staffing, resources. I think that was a component to that issue is they didn't have the capacity to do it at that time. And that's what as I recall.
Actually, what happened is, remember the issue up in Portland with.
Come on to the microphone, because we are full. We're fully recorded here. People want to hear what you have to say.
They actually had funding to do the assessment, and then back in the day up in Portland, bullseye glass became an issue and everything, and the health authority called me up and they said, all of our staff is now working on bullseye glass. We don't have any resources, and so Bob, we're just going to have to table your project. So.
And you never got them to untable it?
No, I never got untabled.
Wow.
And I do have the contact people that I talked about. I can share that with Todd and Peter.
So Commissioner
Local
Chang,
public health authority asks for it, then maybe they'll listen.
so you were doing that as a DEQ
As a DQ
person with deep knowledge on this.
Mhm.
So any thoughts from DEQ? Is that a ask that you'd be interested in, I guess, partnering if we get to that point?
We would, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so there you go.
Thanks, Greg.
Anyway, I'll go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
If we're thinking we're leaving this topic soon, I just want to point out that there are many things, we've done many things. We've and maybe put a dent in how fast this problem is getting worse. There are still many more things to do, and we've heard about some of those today. The price tags, all, any way you slice it, are going to be big. Retrofitting thousands and thousands of septic systems, tens of millions of dollars. Putting in sewers in some key areas, tens of millions of dollars. Installing domestic water systems, a community water system, tens of millions of dollars. So we absolutely need to do everything we can to ensure that our constituents are have access to clean drinking water. And it might make us home in on, let's do the community drinking water systems. At the same time that I appreciate that concept, I also am concerned that if we're spending tens of millions of dollars already, and if we're trenching up an entire neighborhood to lay pipe for drinking water system, wouldn't it make sense, and these don't necessarily all overlap, but I mean, if you're going to dig a bunch of trenching and lay a bunch of pipe, you could also be doing community water, wastewater systems. And the advantage of looking at community wastewater systems is that we would be doing a significant effort to slow the rate of nitrate loading in the community. So I mean, while community water system would solve the problem for people on that system of having access to clean drinking water in the near future, they could still be sitting in basically a field of contaminated groundwater, and we need to be thinking about that issue as well.
No, I think the wastewater system, clearly, we have to quit putting the nitrates in the ground. So that it's got to start there, and then domestic water, afterwards. But definitely the nitrates in South County have got to be we've got to do better than 4%. Todd, 200 and what did you say? 80? Yes.
I think we've done more than that, but
I
most of
would
those
hope
have
so.
probably been full on new houses and new systems, so it didn't count as a repair.
Okay.
So years ago, I had the septic pump pump truck at my house, and the operator, longtime family, had been doing it forever there. They said, I figured out years ago people should be putting their septic systems in their front yard, because then you could be set up for a step system, which is septic tank, effluent pump. So then you could just run the effluent out. So that was just a statement he made in passing, probably before I got elected. And I didn't even appreciate it at the time. But he said, yeah, we should be building systems in their front yards instead of the backyard, so it's closer to the road. So that was just an interesting reference. And then also just another sense of place. Remember, ODOT was building an overpass, and they built a concrete, and they loaded up the dirt, and the whole thing started to sink. And they did their geology, down to a standard depth, and the whole thing sank. And then they went back and they just kept digging, and it was just old lake bed for as far as they could go, with water the whole way down. So it's just a sense of place. It was really interesting, and that's at Wiki Up. I don't know what the rest of that footprint looks like, but there is deep water as far as they wanted to dig, it sounds like. So just a reference point.
So do you think the middle of April is I want you guys coming back sooner rather than later. I don't want to wait, another 2 years or something. We need to actually get a plan going. If we meet the middle of April, the 1st of May,
Well, and then
those tests will be done. And I know you said you're not going to really find anything out significant with those tests, but the problem is getting worse. It's an accumulation factor. So what do you think, Greg?
That would work for us in that time frame. Yes.
Okay.
QAQC.
Yeah, Commissioner, if you're wanting to get the whole data before we have that discussion, it could be longer. I think we're looking to test there in March and April, and then the QA/QC and the trend analysis takes a couple months, so I can't promise that it
You're
would be
talking
available.
about like June 15th?
Yes,
I'm an optimist.
yes.
Okay, because we're not ignoring this. We will get to the bottom of it. And I appreciate, okay. So June, but in the meantime, we need to have some more work sessions on this, Todd.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
I mean, one specific thing that I suggested is that we draft this letter to OHA. That's one specific action I'd like us to begin. I'd be curious to hear from my fellow commissioners whether they will support county staff working on scoping out a different Goal 11 exception, in partnership with DEQ, but to for the county to actually be a partner in that rather than, saying we want DEQ to just go lead that effort.
Do we need Shannon here for that decision?
No.
Okay.
I think that's a decision on our part.
It's a decision on, yep, agree.
How active a partner and how much of a leadership role we want the county to play in scoping out a new Goal 11 exception.
Nick, did you have any comment?
No, that's exactly the right next step. And then the Community Development Department will be bringing back their annual work plan to the board for review and consideration within the next couple of months. And so that'll be the opportunity for CDD to demonstrate their capacity or what the trade-offs and projects will be.
Well, and I already came to this conclusion, and I mentioned it earlier. I'm here to protect good groundwater, and we have resources on the horizon to do this. I'm not willing to step in with one agency to try to negotiate with another agency where every agency in the state thinks their number one priority. I'm not interested in doing that.
And so what does that mean about your desire for county staff to be involved in this process or not?
I would ask DEQ to lead if they think they're number one priority here, or get clarity on that situation. As I say, I don't have the answer right now, but why would we go down the same path that we've already gone down? And Peter just said very specifically, the way that land use is set up, Goal 11 is a monumental high-risk task. Yeah.
The blanket Goal 11 exception that the county pursued before is a monumental task. A revised modified Goal 11 exception could be different. And I'll just say if the Board of Commissioners does not want the county and county staff to be involved in scoping a Goal 11, a modified Goal 11 exception, I'm very happy to put my personal time into it. My personal one commissioner's time, not with the direction or blessing of the full Board of Commissioners, but
so the message that I'm receiving is you have special way to get through the land use process that the rest of the professionals in the room don't.
the special way to get through the land use process is to get all the stakeholders together, identify what the fatal flaws in a exception proposal would be, and then address all of those on the front end before you go into a formal application, rulemaking, regulatory process. This has been shown to be successful in all kinds of natural resource management issues. And it's something I have a significant amount of experience with in water supply issues, forest management issues, and in other places.
I would. Oh, okay. No more comments on that.
Okay. We will discuss this at our next meeting. Can we do that under other items?
So if, what are you referring to?
Well, I want to do I want to have a few more private conversations with people. Drafting a letter to OHA, modify Goal 11 exception. I definitely want to do
today, but
I want to do something. I just would like to bring it back under other items. and not by June, but sooner than that.
I think Commissioner or Chair Adair, I think we should schedule it and properly notice it on the
Okay.
agenda
Perfect.
as a work session.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the first reading. Audrey?
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Audrey Stewart, Associate Planner with Community Development. The item before you today is the first reading of Ordinance 2024-003. This is an ordinance approving a comprehensive plan amendment and a zone change. The subject property is located just south of Bend on Knott Road. It's about 65 acres in size. It's currently zoned surface mining, and they've applied to change the zoning to multiple use agricultural. And concurrently, they've applied to change the comprehensive plan designation from surface mine to rural residential exception area. I was before you last Wednesday, and at that meeting, the board voted to adopt the hearings officer decision. So I'm returning today for the first reading, and then I'll be back before you 2 weeks from now for the second reading. There was one minor edit after the board packet was published, and this is just a reference to a section number within the ordinance. And so that change will be made when it comes back next or 2 weeks from now. And with that, I'm available for any questions or discussion from the board.
Okay. Are we ready for a motion?
So just acknowledge that, this zone change and plan amendment, we would almost expect a public hearing required, but it's because it's not agricultural land. Surface mining is the other path that's coming
Correct.
from. Yeah.
Correct, Commissioner. So if a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change doesn't involve either resource lands or an exception to statewide planning goal, then our procedures ordinance says the hearings officer shall issue a decision, and then the board, assuming no one appeals it, the board will either adopt that decision or call it up and initiate their own hearing.
And it hasn't been appealed. Yeah. So
No
that's
appeals.
just thinking the big picture.
I would just say that I do not think that surface mining zoning makes sense for this site anymore now that the mineral resource is exhausted. I don't think that this is the best way for us to comprehensively plan for the growth of our community, doing piecemeal rezones like this out of the context of thinking about, particularly, in the near vicinity to our incorporated cities, to be making these decisions in a vacuum like that. But I have no reason to oppose this rezone application.
So is there a motion?
I'll move approval of first reading of ordinance 2024-003 by title only.
And I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Chang,
Yes.
Mr. DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes to move approval by title only of ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 23, the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan to change the comprehensive plan map designation for certain properties from surface mining to rural residential exception area, and amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, the Deschutes County zoning map to change the zone designation for certain property from surface mining to multiple use agricultural. Ordinance number 2024-003. And you'll be back in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Commissioners.
We have that date.
That would be February 21st.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much.
Morning. Kara Cronin, Deschutes County Health Services Program Manager. Holly Harris, Behavioral Health Director. Thanks.
Morning.
Good morning. We're here.
Oh, I just want to make note, after your presentation, we will go to item number 12 because someone that's going to testify has to be out of the room earlier than we expect.
Like them to go before us?
No, that's fine. No, you're fine.
Yeah, today we are requesting permission to apply for a grant in the amount of $1 million to support a community navigator pilot for aid and assist. It's a topic I've brought to you several times over the last couple of years. We were approached by the state as they're wanting us to be a pilot site. It comes with the addition of 2 FTE that I believe we are doing limited duration as department's just not in a place to do permanent positions at this moment.
We do expect that the funding will be ongoing. There's obviously no guarantee that with the success of a pilot, the budget note from the legislature for this pilot was ongoing funding. So it wasn't one-time funding from the legislature. So it is ongoing funding, but the state has chosen to do a pilot with the money and specifically asked us to participate in the pilot because our aid and assist program is one of the best in the state and doing much of this work already, which is great. So it's really not a huge lift for us in terms of the ask of the grant. We're doing a lot of it, and we're able to use these funds to help cover some of the work we're doing, which is nice.
Yeah, some of the uncovered costs we're already incurring in this area,
Which is great.
It's great.
What are the other 5 areas? Do you know?
Yes, it's Washington, Clackamas. I should have been Jackson, Multnomah, and us.
maybe Lane.
Lane. Is there?
Yeah, because
Is there
you
6?
said 6.
Okay, then
I
Lane
just
is the other
figured
one.
5,
Yeah.
so
Really the top 5 largest counties because they have the most numbers at the Oregon State Hospital for aid and assist, which is what the state's focus is on this pilot.
So if somebody has an issue in, let's say, Jefferson County, can they use this service?
No, aid and assist is pretty specific to the court systems within your own county.
County. Okay, so they have to stay there.
They do.
But we have this capacity.
We do.
And we're the only ones on this side of the mountains.
We are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for being selected to apply.
Well, seeing the word American Rescue Plan emergency dollars, no, those are kind of one-time funds. So, it's wonderful to be able to qualify for these and provide this resource, and it'll be something to keep an eye on as the legislature makes decisions next time around. Mm-hmm.
And which is why we made the positions limited duration, because even though the state has sort of indicated that this will likely be ongoing funding, until we know that for sure, these are not positions that we would likely continue without the state level funding.
Yeah.
Great.
I'd say I so appreciate that the state is recognizing the challenge that the aid assist population presents for all Oregonians, really, and particularly in these 6 counties. So I'm really glad that these resources are available, and we will be able to apply them towards addressing the better service for the aid and assist population, and in so doing, making our community a lot safer. I am curious, kind of. I'm also interested in trying to kind of read the tea leaves on the politics around this stuff, and I'd be curious to hear your perspectives on whether you think the this funding that. Basically, since the Mossman decision, there have been a lot of counties who've been making a lot of noise about the aid and assist population and being overwhelmed and having insufficient capacity to address the needs of the aid and assist population. Is that where this money comes from? I mean, is this a product of that political pressure? And I mean, if so, then do you think that same political pressure is going to encourage the legislature to, kind of look at more long-term predictable funding for these services?
I think yes and no. I think political pressure has led to some investments for this population. However, Oregon Health Authority is very focused on what's happening in the Oregon State Hospital. I wish they were more focused on what's happening in communities, because we advocated with this funding that it be used for community restoration efforts, because our community, so folks that go into the state hospital, Mossman order requires that they get released oftentimes well before we think they're ready to be released. They come back to our community very ill, still needing a ton of support. And for us, those numbers are what's going up. But this money is really focused on getting people out of the Oregon State Hospital. So both are issues. We want people out of the Oregon State Hospital with the right supports in place, because we need that. We need the state hospital available for our civil commitment processes, as Kim can well tell you. And so it does ultimately, it's all part of the system, right? But what I hope from this pilot comes is more focus on the community restoration needs and efforts that counties are completely overwhelmed with at the moment, that these dollars will maybe help inadvertently, but not help directly.
And the ongoing discussions about secure residential treatment facilities are part of that.
Absolutely.
Part of that discussion as well.
Absolutely. And we are making some headway on getting a secure residential treatment facility in our area, working directly with the state potentially to get some funding for that. So movement is happening, not at the pace I would like, but it's happening. And so more to come on that for sure before the board.
Thank you for diligently working that every day.
So yeah, when I made my statement, I was looking at the next agenda item and the source of the dollar. So that wasn't for this one. I just figured that out. Yeah.
I was going to look into that after.
Yeah, no, I just figured out what I said there.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
So is there a motion?
I'll move to authorize the submittal of an application for a community navigator pilot program from the Oregon Health Authority.
And I will second it. I was able to look this up and, see the some media coverage on this and the efforts going on. So it's exciting to be able to do this.
Great. Any further discussion? Mr. Chang,
Yes.
Mr. DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. Well, good luck. Okay, let's now go to item number 12, the declaration. If you don't mind. I just want to, first of all, recognize the city of Redmond sent in a letter to all three of us last night declaring their support for a fentanyl state of emergency for Deschutes County. All Mayor Fitch and all councilors signed this letter. So thank you for that support. I feel like every day is a new challenge. We do have quite a few pieces of documentation, and I just wanted to be aware that when we had our AOC meeting on Monday, it was passed in legislation. I confirmed it with Jessica Pratt this morning that we added it needed to be advocates for Class A misdemeanor for possession of a controlled substance. And we also stressed the importance, this was item number 5, of using the term diversion over deflection as currently defined by industry standards within healthcare treatment and law enforcement policies. So those were 2 important changes that were added to the document that we were recommending for House Bill 4002.
And I was at that meeting yesterday, the legislative position taking meeting of the Association of Oregon
Monday.
Counties.
Yesterday was Tuesday.
I was there for 2 nights, so it all ran together. That's right. Yeah. So yesterday I drove home, but Monday afternoon, we did discuss Class A misdemeanor as the starting point. And I just wanted to point out, in coordination with the position of the Oregon Sheriff's Association, representing all the citizens in the state being county sheriffs, and also district attorneys being elected officials countywide, also representing all the people in the state.
And LOC, I did speak to Kent Vanderkamp, who works on code enforcement, and he has a few comments he'd like to make. And we do have some documentation too from William Bailey in our record.
And just to clarify, yeah, so I made that call to the sheriff. I said, please provide some examples of maybe some activities in the recent past.
If I could just double check something for a moment. I think we're talking about an emergency declaration, and then my fellow commissioners were just discussing legislative advocacy positions and I'm trying to understand what the connection is here. So is the goal of doing this emergency declaration to is the goal of this emergency declaration legislative advocacy? Because typically emergency declarations are done so that you can deploy more resources, undertake new initiatives, not necessarily for legislative advocacy. So if our goal is legislative advocacy, I do want to raise the question of whether something different than an emergency declaration might be a better vehicle to do that.
Well, thank you for that question. That's why I was wondering why the governor declared that Multnomah County was the emergency when I feel like it's the entire state. So this is clearly bringing direction to what is happening in my home state. I was born here. We lost seven residents in Deschutes County last month. We have babies born in our hospital that are born with fentanyl. It is an emergency, and I do believe this declaration is clearly pointing out what's happening in Oregon. Measure 110 was an idea that hasn't. The unintended consequences have been incredibly impactful. We've got fentanyl all over the place. It's in all kinds of colors. Just talking to Dr. Baker about it on Saturday night, Dr. Baker from Jefferson County. Fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. I believe I was just told this morning that we had an overdose death in Sisters 2 days ago. So I just feel like something has to happen. And thank you, Kent.
Yeah. So if I could just, I do really want to hear what you have to say, Detective Vanderkamp, but everything you just said is very important to point out. It could just as easily be put into a proclamation as it could be into an emergency declaration. So I'm
following the lead of our governor.
Well,
I texted her that last week and I said,
okay.
It's an emergency.
So this is a response to the Multnomah County, City of Portland, Governor's Office declaration. And as best I can tell, what happened there was that those three governmental bodies identified a problem together, identified additional resources that could be deployed to impact that problem, identified new initiatives that they were going to undertake together, and then formalized those new resources and those new initiatives with an emergency declaration. We have not done that in this case. I mean, this is packaged right now. This is an emergency declaration just for Deschutes County, and we haven't even identified what the county would do new and different than what we have been doing, which is a lot, but we are not, you haven't identified what new resources the county is ready to put on the table, what new initiatives we're going to do beyond what we're already doing. So I think that if we want to do an emergency declaration, we should do that work. We should figure out what new resources, what new actions an emergency declaration would formalize. And we could do that work with our constituent cities, at Bend and Redmond. We could do that work with the governor's office, and then we could roll out an emergency declaration that does more than name the problem. Naming the problem is important, but identifying what we're going to do.
Chang, in all due respect, we are losing young people. They are dying of drugs, and a lot of people are unaware of the seriousness of the situation. We've got the sheriffs, we've got the DAs, the League of Cities, the county commissioners are all telling the story that we've got to have a Class A. We've got to have some teeth into this. And you know what? We desperately need teeth into this. It's a message. And I think that message cannot be ignored. So Kent, I know you're on a time schedule. Would you want to go ahead? And then if Commissioner Chang wants to say more, you'll be off the hook.
Thank you for the invitation. My name is Kent Vanderkamp. I am a sergeant with the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, and I am currently assigned to the Central Oregon Drug Enforcement Team. For those of you that don't know, CODE, or Central Oregon Drug Enforcement, is a multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional task force that's initiative of HIDTA, or the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, out of Washington, D.C., and we're funded by the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. Our team consists of law enforcement officers from the 3 counties, Central Oregon counties, that is, Jefferson, Deschutes, and Crook County. We also have representation from DEA, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and our local DA's office, which is also cross-designated as a U.S. attorney. Our main mission is to seek out, disrupt, and dismantle large drug trade organizations in the Central Oregon area. So our job is to find where the source of the drugs are coming from, not so much the local drug dealers, but how they're getting to us here in Central Oregon. Since I've been on the team, I can tell you that fentanyl continues to be the monster that grows every day. Since I've been on the team, it's probably up 200 to 300% from when I first started on a team 7 years ago as a detective. I say that because I also do DUI enforcement as a drug recognition expert. So I am called on to evaluate and make determinations on drivers that are impaired by something other than or in addition to alcohol. I point it out because that is where I'm also seeing fentanyl present itself, is in our driving public. People who are impaired by opioids or narcotic analgesics, of which fentanyl is, are on our roadways in addition to people that are living in our community and they're dying from this. So I want to dive into the stakes. I'm here to give you information and facts. So if you have any questions, that's what I'm here to talk about. I can answer some questions about what the legislature is doing now, but I can tell you more about what we're seeing in our community. But right now, more than 1 million people in the U.S. have died because of opioids since 2000. It has become the leading cause of death for people between the ages of 18 and 49. That includes comparing things to cancer and heart disease. Fentanyl is killing more people than those 2 things alone. There has been a particularly sharp increase since the pandemic of opioids. And you'll hear me refer to opioids because fentanyl is a classification or is a named item in an opioid or narcotic analgesic category. One of the original opioids we might remember is, I'll go backwards. Opioid crisis started way before fentanyl. This started in the East Coast with heroin and prescription drugs. It's still very common right now in the Southwest. It then progressed into heroin, which is a natural form of an opioid. And then ultimately in 2016, fentanyl came onto the marketplace. Fentanyl is not a novel drug. It's used today in modern medicine. But what the difference is now is that this is not pharmaceutical grade fentanyl that we're dealing with today. This fentanyl is very, very potent. The precursors or ingredients of this are coming from Chinese laboratories, then being sent to Mexico, where it's then converted and built into various products. We're seeing it in pills, the fake pills that are made to look like pharmaceutical drugs. We're seeing it in powder form. We're seeing it in liquid forms, and it's very cheap and easy to make. The pills are then brought across the southern border, which has increased greatly since the pandemic ended and border activities have opened. The majority of our fentanyl that we see in this area, it comes in the form of powder and in pills. The route that our fentanyl usually takes comes to us from the Portland metro area. The Honduran drug cartels bring it up into Oakland, California. From Oakland, it then goes to Portland. And then from Portland, it's distributed into Central Oregon. Many of the studies that we've seen are showing that the manufacturing of the pills will cost the cartels between 3 and 5 cents a pill to make. They're sold on the streets of Southeast Portland, ranging from 50 cents to $1.50. And then once it makes it over to Central Oregon, we're seeing it in the price range of $3 to $5, depending on your source and where you're getting it from. I will tell you that the deaths have obviously risen dramatically over the last decade. But because we're seeing this, just this epidemic, the cost is really in our community to the families and the individuals has been absolutely devastating. The amount of overdoses that we investigate have increased to tenfold. I'll tell you, last night, Bend Police had 3 nearly simultaneous overdose emergencies, which put a huge tax on both our fire and EMS, as well as law enforcement and hospital staff for that matter. The opioid crisis really has to stem from how we stop the control at the border. The border has been our problem. U.S. Department of Justice has given us instructions, because we get a lot of material from them, to focus on the distribution methods in the Pacific Northwest. Here in Central Oregon, we have found that the majority of our drugs are being brought over from the Hondurans. The cartels have identified vulnerable people in our community, addicts, homeless, mentally ill, to help distribute their drugs. That's their model. They've been using it in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco for right around 6 years, and we see the same models being used here. Unfortunately, a lot of times people don't realize that the pills are dangerous. I'll give you an example of the pills. They're not made in a pharmacy. They're not made in any sort of scientific manner. There's no recipe being used. They're taking powder from these Chinese laboratories, putting it into a crude paint bucket, mixing it up, putting it into a pill dispenser, and then dispensing pills. Some pills are produced with nothing other than acetaminophen filler or Tylenol, aspirin. Other pills are being produced with nearly solid fentanyl, and it has become the modern day version of Russian roulette. Addicts have no idea what they're taking. They're risking their lives every time they eat a pill. My biggest concern too now is that the cartels have identified great ways of marketing pills, and they have now gone to the internet. We have many cases where pills are being sold on social media. Kids, college-age kids, seniors, and everybody in between will have these ads pop up in their social media feed and recognize what a cheap alternative to medication. They might use it for recreation. They might use it as an alternative to what their doctor might charge them 3 times as much for. They order the drugs, the drug dealer mails it to them right to their home. They open the package, eat the pill, and die. It's a very common event that we see, but I will tell you that with the crime that comes with the drug addiction also comes cursory crimes, which has affected the quality of life of our community. To feed addiction, people become desperate and will steal, rob, and do anything they can to get their next pill. So with this comes shoplifting, retail theft, car burglaries, home burglaries, and everything in between. So that's a combat that patrol officers and deputies and troopers have to also manage. So it has these cursory crimes as well. I don't want to get too into the nitty gritty of where the pills come from, but that's what we're experiencing today here in Deschutes County. Any questions for me?
You said there were 3 overdoses last night that Bend was,
Yes, ma'am.
police was dealing, but were they successfully all saved?
They were, and it was an example too of where people thought they were taking one drug, and indeed it was the drug they purchased, but it was laced with fentanyl as well, and they didn't know that that's what they were taking. So they were poisoned, for lack of a better word. I would call it an overdose, but it's really a poisoning too.
Okay.
Sergeant Vanderkamp, thank you so much for laying out those pathways that fentanyl is coming to our community for us. And thank you for your work with the code team every day to interdict the supply of these dangerous, controlled, illegal substances in our community. I believe what we're doing right now is looking at an emergency declaration for Deschutes County. I'd be curious to hear if you have any suggestions for us on things that Deschutes County could be doing that we are not already doing, or things that need to be dialed up, which could then be connected in with this emergency declaration.
There's 2 things. The first one is delivering a message, especially to young people and older people and everybody in between again, but getting that word out there that what you think is a pharmaceutical pill is not a pharmaceutical pill. Do not take a pill unless it's given to you by an actual doctor or pharmacist. Buying pills on the internet is not safe. It sounds simple to a lot of people in this room, but for many, it's not. They think that they're getting a good deal. So delivering that message, public health does a great job. A lot of our community advocates in both the homeless community that I work with, and we've turned to that to where I'm now working with mental health and homeless advocates to say, hey, get this word out there. But that's the big message, get the word out there. Ideally, I would always love to have more investigators and more detectives. So bringing more people into code and having them support our mission is ideal. We have a lot of neighboring counties who don't have the resources that we are blessed with here in Deschutes County, and have also recently become frustrated. For Jefferson County, for example, has recently put a detective on our team for the first time in 15 years because they're battling the same battle that we all have. And so getting support, especially for those smaller communities who don't have it. Our team travels. We support Deschutes County. It's my home, but we also help our neighbors. And so we are doing many cases in Cook County and Jefferson County as well. And they don't have those resources. So bringing more resources, investigative resources to the team. And I also am a big collaborator. And so I've been working with public health and a lot of nonprofits and a lot of the homeless advocates in those 3 counties to also join hands, because we're all dealing with the same problem. So bringing a lot more people to the table would be very important as well.
Sergeant, how many people now can do that identification where if you're using, you can tell not only were they drinking, but they were using drugs? You mentioned that you have that capacity. How many other people in Deschutes County Sheriff's Office have that, or in Deschutes County?
Well, I can tell you there's only one other person. So there's two that have been trained. The training is rather extensive. So for many law enforcement officers, it's a task that they're not interested in, but it also requires a lot more extensive training. In Deschutes County, I want to say we're up to 7 now in all of Deschutes County that have that training. It's statewide. It's only about 100, and I think we're down to 117 DREs now in the state. But I will tell you that on a nightly basis,
Drug recognition expert. Okay. Yes.
My phone probably goes off nightly where they're looking for a DRE to do an evaluation in Deschutes County, and many of them go unanswered because they're tasked with other things and they can't get to the jail or to Redmond to help. But it's almost a daily thing that we could make a career out of just being a DRE in Deschutes County. It's a much needed role.
Thank you for that.
Well, and I'd like to say thank you too for giving us the big picture. And you started off with the concept of raise public awareness. That's the key to this right now. And that's how I would conclude that emergency declarations are the right place to be. We need the community to understand what's going on. And it's an uphill path right now. It's getting worse daily. You said something about the monster. I forget the term, but yeah. So it's here and it's happening. And you hear about it starting on the East Coast, going to the West Coast. There's a lot of pressure. People are making bad choices really quick in this domain in distribution and consumption too right now, it looks like. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it is 10:57. So
I see that.
yeah, well, close. It was close. All right. Are there any other?
So I do have these 3 scenarios that were
Yes.
provided to us by the sheriff's office also. So this is this is kind of court cases and the progression. So I'm interested in reading these just so we can hear about it a little bit. So March and April of 23, 2 subjects involved in dealing fentanyl pills in Deschutes County. Subject 1 was arrested after returning to Deschutes County from Portland, as we just heard about. Arrested with approximately 1,000 fentanyl pills, 25 milligrams of powdered fentanyl, and a pistol. The next day, subject 2 arrested after making a trip to the Portland area. He initially ran on foot, but was later captured through subsequent search warrants for his vehicle and residence. Detectives located approximately 12,000 fentanyl pills, 40 grams of fentanyl powder, a pistol, 5 milligrams of methamphetamine, along with packaging materials. Of note, that subject 2 overdosed after running on foot, and Narcan was administered to him before being transported to the hospital and then to jail. So these are just some scenarios of some escalating situations. I'll read one if you want to read one, or I can
No,
read.
that's okay. No, I just thought of something else that I think the public needs to be aware of is horse tranquilizer. Tranq has also been into the mix, and that makes it incredibly difficult. Narcan doesn't touch it. So, I've heard stories where people are barely saved at our local hospitals. It just keeps getting worse. And if you want to read the last one.
Sure. Well, so there's three. So this would be second. In December 22, subject was arrested by code team for possessing 106 grams of methamphetamine, approximately 600 fentanyl pills, sentenced to 30 days in county jail after, or 2 months after, was initially arrested by code. DCSO street crimes detective arrested him for possessing 25 grams of powder fentanyl, 57 grams fentanyl pills, over 600 pills, 58 grams of methamphetamine and digital scales. He also possessed a non-criminal amount of cocaine. He received 60 days in jail on this case. Immediately upon release, street crimes began another investigation into drug dealing and was later arrested for his third case in less than 1 year. During the third arrest, he possessed approximately 6,000 fentanyl pills, packaging and scales, along with other baggies of unknown powder, sentenced to 13 months on this third case. So just kept coming back and getting more involved. And then finally, after a fentanyl overdose at a residence in Bend, detectives began an investigation into subject 4. A street crimes detective executed a search warrant at the residence in 2023, resulting in 8.9 grams of fentanyl pills being located. A roommate at the residence, subject 5, was also arrested possessing 7.7 grams of fentanyl pills, 35 grams of methamphetamine, a pistol, digital scales, along with numerous other amounts of various controlled substances. So as I say, this has been going on for a while and it's escalating.
And our health department says it's only going to get worse.
I want to thank City for Redmond to respond. So media called me when our agenda was published, and I hadn't heard about this before the agenda, and obviously we're all involved in our different avenues here. So my statement was, well, I'll look into it. So it was written up in the media. Commissioner DeBone may or may not be supportive. I'm like, well, I didn't get there. So kind of serious business. Thank you for Redmond for responding to this effort. Another whole aspect of this, and we talked about it at our AOC, Association of Oregon Counties, some legislative discussions on Monday, 2 days ago, State Medical Examiner's Office and toxicology labs. I know our health department has put systems in place to really make a predetermination of drug overdoses, but it just doesn't get finalized or landed until we have official toxicology from state labs. And the medical examiner's office need for resources is critical. So we have these huge delays in officially calling somebody a death from overdose from some of these controlled substances. And so the numbers are a year behind. And as this is escalating, it's probably really important to, I would assert that it's very important to have these resources in the medical examiner's office in support of the efforts going on when people do pass away. And we do support our medical examiner's office efforts here. In fact, that may be an action item for us, knowing that, medical examiner is that, it's that awkward thing to fund as you're a growing county, because when there's not a lot of activity, some doctor, some person with skills can go, help do the paperwork and follow the scene, but this is escalating. So that may be an action item right there is our local medical examiner resources during this period. In fact, I would support having that discussion. As I say, emergency declaration is 90 days. But if we can do something for that effort in support of our health department and medical examiners, let's look into that.
Yes, because I know works at the hospital too.
There is a bill in this short session. I believe it's originating from Washington County that's focused on understanding medical examiner capacity around the state and ensuring that the state is playing a more active role in making sure that capacity is there, which I think would mean cost sharing for us on that position.
It was confirmed. It was passed by the county commissioners on Monday. So is there a motion then?
Before you make a motion, I do just want to say that we are absolutely having a crisis. If our goal, if the goals as I see them right now that have been presented are to raise community awareness, and to pursue certain legislative advocacy. I would be very excited to vote in favor of a emergency declaration that included new county initiatives, new resources at the county level, or being deployed by a partner at the, at the state or city level, as part of a declaration. But I do not think that this declaration is mature yet. And I do think if our goals are raising community awareness, there are other ways of doing that. Like this has been a great session today, for helping to raise community awareness, and certainly for our legislative advocacy. There are other vehicles for us to accomplish that. So if you want to proceed with this emergency order that I believe is premature at this point, I'll be abstaining until we see a more mature proposal.
Thank you very much for those comments. And thank you for the sergeant for coming in and pointing out leading cause of death between 18 and 49. So yeah, it's a nightmare across the entire country.
So I'll move approval of order number 2024-007 and propose that we read the whereases just to, acknowledge the words that we're moving here.
Okay, and I will second it. An order declaring a local state of emergency. Any further comments? Commissioner Devon
Yes.
and Commissioner Chang.
Abstain.
Okay, and the chair votes yes, an order declaring a local state of emergency. You
So we can just read the
Okay.
whereases. I'll read them, or you can read them all.
want to read one? I'll read next. Go ahead, read the first two, and then I'll read the last three.
Okay, so an order declaring a local state of emergency, whereas ORS 401305 provides authority for Deschutes County to act as an emergency management agency, including authority to establish policies and protocols for defining and directing responsibilities during time of emergency. Whereas ORS 401309 and Deschutes County Code 204 and the Deschutes County Emergency Operations Plan authorizes the county governing body to declare a state of emergency within the county or within a designated portion of the county, and to establish procedures to prepare for, carry out activities which are necessary to prevent, minimize, respond to, or recover from an emergency.
Whereas the following conditions have resulted in the need for a local state of emergency: the continuing presence of fentanyl in Deschutes County, increased fatal and non-fatal overdoses in Deschutes County, and emergency orders January 30th, 2024 from the governor and representatives of Multnomah County and the city of Portland, calling for cross-jurisdiction collaboration and allocations and focusing of resources to combat fentanyl use and impacts. And whereas the presence of fentanyl within Deschutes County constitutes a high threat to public health, to writ, addiction, death, and associated unlawful behaviors. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention provide that fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, is up to 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine, is a major contributor to fatal and non-fatal overdoses in the United States, and is often added to other drugs, resulting in drugs that are cheaper to purchase, more powerful, more addictive, and more dangerous. Therefore, the Board of Deschutes County the County Commissioners of Deschutes County, Oregon hereby orders as follows, and I won't read all those, but we definitely, we need to do something. So I thank you for your support.
Well, and I would acknowledge that this is the time for action, as to say, we've got other police agencies, we've got other city councils and the citizens themselves. We all need to understand this is a crisis at this point in time, and let's look for those actions. Commissioner Chang mentioned what's the county going to do, but I would reverse that and say we need to acknowledge this as a community, look out for each other, and put pressure on this activity that's so detrimental to our community.
I mean, I just thought it was very warning that if you're ordering it online, parents have to be aware of packages coming to their house, and just ensuring that it's really what your son or daughter is telling you, because that's a new worry.
Yeah, that's a great thing to be concerned about, and I'm glad that Sergeant Vanderkamp pointed that out for us. And I would actually encourage us to start planning our first. What are we going to do around that? Again, I am not saying that we're not having a crisis. I'm saying, what are we doing about it besides talking?
Well, thank you very much. Talking, we did do billboards. Thank you very much. Yes, and been talking about it a lot and talking. The other thing we haven't talked about is ideal options. They are here in Bend. They're in Redmond. If you think you know someone that needs some help, please talk to the people at Ideal Options also, because they're here to help. And our health department too. So we have a lot of people that are available if you have any worries. Paul, I believe you are item number 8. Sorry for the delay.
And this is the one that's funded by ARPA dollars. I was just looking
Yes,
at
it is.
Yeah.
Correct. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you about this. My name is Paul Partridge. I'm the program manager for Deschutes County Intellectual Developmental Disability Services. What I think is a fairly simple ask for just applying for a grant of some funding that's been made available through the Oregon Department of Human Services Office of Developmental Disability Services. These are ARPA dollars that are being offered to every case management entity throughout Oregon to be able to administer to the clients that we serve to help them prepare for future emergency situations. We could almost think of this as pass-through dollars, really. We're not asking for any staff, any FTE, no position authority for additional staff. This is all money that's going to be used to purchase supplies and equipment to better equip individuals or providers who support individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities to be better equipped and prepared for emergency situations.
Mm-hmm.
As you all know, we have some kind of routine emergencies that sort of happen in Central Oregon just by features of smoke emergencies that we can pretty much count on every year. So I think this is a pretty important investment that's being offered for our clientele.
Well, and I don't know the specific investments. You might already have some ideas about what the needs are out there, but it's exciting to have these resources to be able to offer in a prioritized list of the most valuable investments we can make for folks in, because a little bit less mobility possibly, or even making mobility possible when needed.
Yeah, examples of equipment that might be purchased, and I want to do we've been kind of querying our advisory committee to get input and from providers as well on what would be useful to them. But I also want to partner with Sergeant Garibay and the emergency management to get some influence in terms of how we might best position. But it's going to be very person-centered depending on individuals' diagnoses. Examples might be an emergency backup generator or battery pack that can be used to operate medical equipment if someone's reliant upon medical equipment related to their disability. It could be cooling in the case of extreme heat for folks maybe on the autism spectrum who are very sensitive to environmental stimuli like heat. It could be used for that. It could be actually used for snow removal equipment for a group home provider who needs to be able to create access for medical personnel to respond in case of emergencies for their residents. So those are just some examples, or even ready kits or shelter in place kind of kits for individuals to sort of strengthen their own home emergency preparedness efforts.
Right.
So when is the deadline for this application in?
Actually, I've gotten an extension. They gave us a very short timeline. It's tomorrow.
Okay, so you're going to have a list on that application tomorrow?
No, really, it's just an online application, basically saying we intend to move forward. It's not a detailed application at all.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'll move to authorize the submittal of this application for ARPA Emergency Response Grant from the state's Office of Development Disability Services.
A second, and thank you for that list of examples. It's very helpful to understand that.
Any other discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you and good luck. All right. Let's see, we are out of item number 9.
Good morning, commissioners. For the record, Tarek Rawlings. I'm a senior transportation planner in the road department. And I was going to hand out a larger print version of today's deliberation matrix. As a reminder, the item today is the deliberations for the county's 2020 to 2040 transportation system plan update. In coordinating with administration, I was under the understanding today is a really full meeting. And so we've kind of put this in here as a placeholder. We could give you the materials to review, but our understanding is that this will get continued until next Wednesday.
Valentine's Day, yes.
Valentine's Day, the 14th, exactly. So we would have kind of a more full deliberation review of the actual procedurally going through that matrix or however else you'd like to proceed with deliberations. But our understanding is that we'd conduct that on the 14th. Just noting all the important items in the full schedule you've had today.
So do you have a packet then for us?
Yeah, I was
now?
going to hand those out if you think that's a good time.
I think that would be wonderful because then we would have a week to review it before Valentine's Day.
Going to talk about, so the record notification for this was notified for 2023. Is that how we ended up with this window of like, oops, the notification?
I think that's the Redmond Airport Master Plan.
Oh, wasn't this?
But
No.
Transportation related, but this one's been, been duly noticed for
Oh, okay, I thought maybe
reopened record period, which ended on the 31st. So we did have a few new comments come in. I have a tally for both the sisters to Black Butte Ranch, sort of number of comments in opposition and support, as well as a tally for the footbridge question that was asked for support and opposition. I can give you those numbers really quick.
Well,
I'll
just for clarity again, then. So this is basically deliberation started for 2 weeks from now.
No, it's
or a week
next
from now. I don't even know what days it is. But yeah, so no record is my point. No other communication is going to go in the record, no debating the record, none of that. I'm just confirming that situation.
Yeah, I'll clarify that just.
Yeah. Okay.
But exactly. This follows an initial public hearing on November 29th of 2023. That was followed by a reopening of the open record period until last Wednesday, January 31st. And there's been a lot of open records before you, and I appreciate you keeping track of all the.
I'm trying. I don't even know what day
it
it is.
I'm right there with you. I really appreciate you keeping an eye on the details and all the various things that are before you. So I would say that following that reopened record period on the 31st, how are you? He might have a precursor for today.
Yeah, County Counsel Dave Doyle. I just want to alert, if you should receive anything that gets to you, we do our best to intercept it since the record's closed. But if we don't and you get it and you see it has anything to do with the TSP, please don't read it, because then we may be in the same situation of yet another reopened record period that we're trying to avoid.
So this is a legislative matter, so it's not breaking the law, but we're trying to have a static record. Is that kind of the concept?
Correct. We're trying to make sure everybody had a fair shake.
Yeah.
No one's going to say that somebody got the last word when I didn't get the last word.
Because some of these topics are very engaging.
Correct. So please, if something finds its way to your desk and it says TSP, don't look at it. Walk it down to Brenda or bring it down to legal, and we'll get with Tarek and figure out if it's something that's already in the record or not.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Exactly. That's a really good disclaimer, and kind of just at the point I was describing of our timeline here, that record did close last week, Wednesday, the 31st at 4 p.m. And so we won't be accepting any new materials after that point. And so now we're just within the deliberations phase. The full record's available to you at the project specific website. I think we have 374 total comments now, in addition, adding those comments received during that reopened period. And so today, I was just going to maybe give you something to review in the interim week, so that when we get to the 14th, maybe you're a little familiar with the deliberation materials. But there are 8 issue areas here. They're very familiar. You've heard them all at some point, either in the public hearings themselves or through those comments. So
those deliberation materials are available to the public?
They are. These are on, well, they're in the agenda
Part of
packet
this
right now. They
Yeah,
will be
just making
short-
sure everybody can see that.
Absolutely. And they're on the agenda packet, all the matrix, the full transportation system plan draft itself is on the agenda packet. It'll be uploaded to that project website as soon as I get back to my desk.
Good.
Without further ado, I'm going to hand these out to you, just to the commissioners for now. And if there's any follow-up requests, feel free to let me know and I can kind of respond to that next week on the 14th. But I'll hand these out really quickly.
Thank you.
And this is this.
This one, just larger format. Okay. Well, and I'll just acknowledge. So yeah, yesterday I was able to go to the Capitol on Tuesday morning. And so I did some legislative connections there. And then came back yesterday afternoon, knowing this topic was on here. And I did my homework like, oh, do I need to be ready? And my next step, just full disclosure, there's topics here and I just wanted to go back through the record and look up some references that I hadn't. So yesterday afternoon, I was kind of worried, oh, how ready do I need to be today? So that's why I was getting real clear on where we're at and where we're going.
I know because the motion says move to
Yeah.
continue deliberations to Valentine's
But
Day.
I'll be able to do my homework now.
I looked at the agenda and I saw 5 minutes and I figured we weren't having our
Yeah,
real
so same
deliberation.
situation.
I was going to mess up the daily calendar.
Mm.
Sure.
But one thing I'll just address. There a couple of people have written and said, Commissioner Chang he sits on the MPO policy board that sent a letter about this topic, and should that prohibit him from participating in this deliberation? I just want to make it clear for everyone that this is a legislative matter. It is not a quasi-judicial land use application decision. And I am allowed to have opinions and express opinions about legislative matters before the deliberations occur. So to anyone who's still wondering about that, just want to make that clear.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Chang. And yeah, happy to answer any quick questions, acknowledging the full schedule we have.
So Tark, did you have numbers then, sisters for and against or something like that?
Yeah, if you want just a quick kind of over and under. And
Sure.
again, this is not really any interpretation of the comments. It's just a quantification of what's already in record, not new information. The Sisters of Black Butte Ranch Connection, the community connection, had 52 comments in support and about 92 in opposition. The Footbridge Southwest UGB area Footbridge had 89 comments in support and 2 comments in opposition.
And 2 against.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry, how the Footbridge, the numbers for and against were what again?
89 for and 2 against.
Anything else? Those were
That's all the kind of preliminary information.
okay. Thank you so much. 52 and 92 against in sisters.
Correct. So yeah, 52 in support, 92 opposing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think we need a motion, please.
For
To continue the
to
deliberation.
continue.
That's
I can move to continue deliberations on the draft 2020 to 2040 transportation system plan update to February 14th, 2024.
And I will second it.
any further discussion? Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Tarek. We'll see you next Wednesday on the 14th.
Thank you very much, commissioners. I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Could we just take like a 5-minute break, please?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Is Eric here? He's at the right next to me. I would look. Okay, Eric.
Good morning, Commissioners. Eric Kropp, Deputy County Administrator and Acting County Administrator at the moment. This item is seeking board direction on county ARPA funds that have been set aside but not yet obligated by the Board of County Commissioners for to address unsheltered homelessness. You'll recall a number of months ago during ARPA discussions, county staff recommended setting aside $2 million or up to $2 million for potential managed camps or other things to address unsheltered homelessness. As background, as additional background, the Coordinated Homeless Response Office has been working on a process to get proposals to address unsheltered homelessness. And the Coordinated Homeless Response Office and staff developed an RFP and identified public lands that could possibly be used for some types of projects. The RFP also asked public agencies to come forward with possible funds to support such projects, and that's what led us to the discussion about the up to $2 million in ARPA funds. At last week's board retreat, staff and the board discussed the county's $2 million and wanted to seek board direction on these funds. At the board retreat, 2 commissioners supported using $1.5 million for such projects, and Commissioner Chang supported the $2 million. So the purpose of today is to continue that discussion and try to seek board direction on how the board would like staff to use the $2 million or 1.5 if that's the direction of the board. A couple of questions that came up in our discussion last week are, does the board want to review the compiled list of publicly owned property and narrow any of the such projects that would come in from nonprofits? Does the board want to include the county ARPA funds in the CROW RFP process without parameters? Or are there certain expectations of the board? And if there are, what parameters are there? And then the last thing I would like to add is since that discussion last week, a couple things have evolved with the RFP process. Staff working on it is now looking at, rather than issuing an RFP right now, to first do an RFQ or a request for qualifications. So we have a sense of what types of organizations might be willing to provide such services, and then move into an RFP process after that. And part of that discussion was in discussing with the City of Bend of what resources they might bring to the table for this larger RFP process. The City of Bend noted that the short legislative session could develop some funds, and they wouldn't know that until
March 10th.
Until March 10th. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but really the purpose of today is to get board direction on what the board would like to see with the county's ARPA funds. And I'm happy to kind of walk through the questions outlined in the staff report, but I would like to turn it back over to the board chair at this point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Eric. I believe per my agenda conference yesterday, everyone wants to have clarity with how the dollars are allocated. So, I mean, it's just like when Commissioner DeBonne and I said we really wanted to allocate just 1.5 million at this moment in time because we have till the year end to add more. I think that's a more conservative way to go forward with those funds, because you can go through a lot of money quite quickly, and we need to know that we're having results. As far as the first question goes, does the board want to review the compiled list of properties, publicly owned properties? Have you guys seen? Is that email?
So I'm not sure. I've reviewed like the ODOT map, the state map.
Right.
That had ODOT property in, but yeah, the state map originally. So I'm not sure what the current version is of parcels. I mean, what's the status of that? Is that public information?
It is public information.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, if it's
Yeah, the list includes property from the state of Oregon,
Mhm.
city of Bend, and Deschutes County.
Right.
And then the scenario is going to be a service provider kind of picks one and says, this is what we think we could do there if we had this amount of money, and this is how many people we could support.
Yes.
Yes, and they would also be allowed to identify other property. It could be private property or other
Mhm.
publicly owned property.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be limited, but the list would be provided.
So
Well, as I say, my mindset that I'd come to, and I mentioned, is that I want to support the coordinated homeless office leadership on this issue. We need clarity on who's leading and who's following, who's making the policy decisions. As a commissioner, I want to empower that board because it's, it gets rough when we have too many cooks in the kitchen.
yes, it really does. Unless you have a really big kitchen. And that's not exactly the answer here. So I know the county property on it was the 45 acres in Redmond, and then 8.8 acres next to Oasis Village. That was the county property on it. There was a key coding missing from those properties that were given out. So if you do pull it up, the green properties were the ones that they thought were better, and then the red properties weren't. That's from the city of Bend. And then there were a couple properties from the state. I believe were they coded in blue? Something like, anyway, we missed the coding chart for that. I know I have been talking to people that are hopefully going to answer the RFQ. Central Oregon, and when they chose their name, they added an S on the end of villages. So I know that they are considering doing something more in our region. So hopefully they will fill out the RFQ. I don't know if anyone else is. I know that Shepherd's House they are doing a lot currently. The Bethlehem Inn seems to be quite busy. And who else could there be? Right. And then we have, smaller projects. Thank goodness we have our Veterans Village, which will be up to 22. Commissioner Chang, do you have anything about item 1?
Eric, you mentioned the possibility for private properties to be added to this list, or can you speak about that? I mean,
Sure. The list is publicly owned property. The list does acknowledge one private landowner, and that's the Gales property, because it's been discussed publicly and the landowners have indicated an interest. So the list itself only includes publicly owned property plus the Gales property. That's the only privately owned property. But the RFP or RFQ process would also solicit or be open to other private property should the provider identify it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Gales property just did get their soils reports. And apparently they are at the high end of the scale, which could indicate that it really isn't farmland. Currently, they are EFU. And so are the 2 churches that surround their property.
I guess one scenario I'd like us to play out, or explore is, we're talking about allocating county resources here. There are state-owned properties, city-owned properties, county-owned properties, and this one private property on the list right now. Are we thinking that we would only use county money on a county-owned site, or are we open? Is the Board of Commissioners open to a new project on any of those sites, or some subset of those sites that's bigger than the county properties?
I'm I'm open to wherever it needs to go. We need managed camps. We need more than one. And hopefully this process is going to somewhat follow the timeline that was presented last month from the board, the Churro board.
I'm supportive of that also.
Yeah, it's okay. All right.
So, you know, a situation I want us to avoid would be a, you know, a Murphy Road type situation where that, you know, a certain amount of effort and planning goes into a site, and then, you know, there's a lot of neighborhood concern expressed that, and then, you know, we decide we don't want to support that anymore. So I'm trying to figure out how, either in the site selection or the sites that we're open to, or in the parameters that we would set around this proposal process, how we could reduce the likelihood that that's going to happen again. That we would be in that situation where we are supporting a project, and then, you know, suddenly there's a, you know, massive amount of neighborhood resistance, and then or concern, and then we don't want to support that project anymore. Do you have any thoughts on you know, what we, you know, how we process the list of properties or the parameters around this to mitigate against that happening?
Yeah, my recommendation would be, and we can certainly come back as staff, but for the board to review the county-owned land list, and if there's any pieces that do not have board support for any type of project, that could be identified up front.
What about, but I mean, we, you know, my fellow commissioners just expressed openness to using the county dollars on non-county properties as well. I mean, what do we do about that?
That could be applied to non-county property as well, if there's anything that stood out. And part of the RFP process is we don't know what people will propose.
We don't.
So there might be, you know, there might be proposals for some type of supported or managed camp, or there might be a proposal for safe parking.
There were a lot of possibilities on the Bend City list that said safe parking on them. So
Yeah, based on the size.
right, based on the size. But then again, the 4 churches that currently are safe parking in Bend, several of them have the teeniest parking lots. You wouldn't imagine how small they are. So I think 2 of them have very small parking lots. So, all right. So item number 2, any feedback on that item?
So we're getting down to the basics here about some of these, you know, future scenarios, but in high level, I'm interested in seeing progress made. Yeah, you know, we've got the Ninth Circuit Court ruling, and we're going to provide locations for some people, but are we working towards a resolution for Juniper Ridge? We've got an open code enforcement case. We were not allowed, but legally, to allow people to camp there. We're spending money. And so these are the foundations of the decision for me. I mean, are we making progress in doing this? Because it's going to be a scenario where somebody can come in and say, I can do a location for 10 people. I can do a location for 50 people. But which is all fine. But if we're still not working towards a land swap in the east side of Redmond, resolving a code enforcement case, north part of Bend, the lives and, you know, fires and, you know, bad situation at China Hat. And, you know, as I say, I'm not trying to pigeonhole anybody. People need resources and need a place to be, but we have things we need to respond to. Yeah.
Yes. And it needs to be done this year. Because
well, we're going to make
getting
it,
worse.
we're going to make an attempt at moving this all forward this year, but I just, you know, it's kind of 80-20. Are we getting the 80% of anything worked out or not?
It was really
because if we're getting 20% of everything worked out and we still want to grow, it's not going to be a good scenario a year from now.
I know the state has spent $1.2 billion and our homeless numbers
And
increased.
I mean, this is an ancient problem. This is society and people. So as I say, we're not going to solve, we're going to manage, and we're going to try to reduce, conflicts, impacts, and, improve the health situation of all this. So, I'm truly in that scenario here.
I did just have lunch with Jessica Gamble on Saturday, and Jessica has a health council grant, and she is working on the problem. And it was really enlightening to hear from her. She's been homeless 3 times. She has she has 2 children, and she was really helpful in what she's trying to do, because it's her passion, because that's where she was, and she really wants to make our system better. So I'm really hoping we are going to make the system better, and it's going to happen in a 24.
So to go to those priorities, and I share some of those priorities. Juniper Ridge having an impact at Juniper Ridge, having an impact in East Redmond around our 137 acres, having an impact in China Hat Road. The idea came up during our retreat to essentially have a preferential points in the competition among the proposals for at least our dollars, the county dollars, the county ARPA dollars, as part of this RFP process. Does that seem like the kind of parameter we would like to have included in this process?
We represent all the citizens inside and outside the cities countywide. So I don't see it as Deschutes County proper trying to do this, it's for everybody. I'll just leave it at that.
I mean, I think it would be giving additional points to projects that address, our problem areas, doesn't mean that projects that address other concentrations of unauthorized encampment, won't get county funding. It just means that, we're giving a preference or a priority to projects that help us solve our most immediate needs or issues. So, I mean, I would support doing something like that. I mean, at the farther end of the spectrum, we could say we're not gonna offer land or resources to projects that don't do anything, for these 3 sites or these 2 sites. I'm not in favor of doing something that extreme, but I think it would be reasonable to, give some priority points, in a competition for projects that help us with the specific areas where we have problems.
So the Churro board is going to be the one making these decisions, correct?
Right.
And you're saying priority points. So I'd rather just empower them to make the best choices.
I do believe that
Commissioner Adair can represent.
I believe our board will make excellent choices. We all see what's happening in our community, and you watch the news and China Hat's in it constantly. We know East Redmond is critically important, and then Juniper Ridge, that's where we've got our own personal code enforcement. So I believe we will be incredibly careful on what we're doing. And just, it'll be nice
without
to
parameters is fine with me, I guess, is my,
Yeah.
We all know we've got critical issues here.
This is one potential kind of parameter to set on this. What other kinds of parameters could we consider in relation to this solicitation?
Yeah, in addition to the actual land itself, it's the type of services. If the board wanted to say, we want to put more of an emphasis on a managed camp versus, the basic hygiene type of camp, which is, the basic hygiene is what I would define as what we're doing currently at Juniper Ridge. But I guess the other parameters would be the types of services that could be provided or would be provided.
I would certainly like to see projects with both site management and connection to services, case managers, you use specific space, specific time allocated for for people connecting with whatever service providers they need to connect with to help them continue, advance down the path out of homelessness, rather than I don't want us to just be investing in warehousing people.
Never my goal to warehouse people. No, they've got to have connections. I think that's incredibly important. And that's why I have been such a promoter of the safe parking program, because their connections with the parties are impactful, and they're working. So definitely connection to services. A few notes. Projects need to be ARPA eligible. I know we have Dan in the room. Of course we do. And ARPA spending and reporting guide requirements. And of course, that might, remember, Veterans Village actually had to ask it to reverse our funding for them because of the reporting requirements. So we need to be really upfront about the fact that there are ARPA federal reporting requirements that could, cost their project more.
That's correct. And the ARPA eligibility, these are very broad categories, but there's 5 or 6 broad categories. When I've read through the broad categories, it would fall under either local public health, or addressing negative economic impacts, or service to disproportionately impacted communities. But any projects would have to be vetted through our staff that manage the ARPA funds to make sure that the project is ARPA eligible. And then the entity would need to agree to with the ARPA reporting requirements. And if I missed anything, Dan and Laura, I welcome you to come up and add anything.
Wait, Dan, till you get to the microphone. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Emerson, Budget and Financial Planning Manager. Yeah, I would just say, broadly speaking, homelessness and managed camps has fallen under the services to folks that are disproportionately impacted, and we funded quite a bit of that. The only other thing that I would say is that really important is we have to have a fairly specific obligation to this by December 31st of 2024. So these projects can often be very complex, and a lot of decisions need to be made. So that would be one thing that I would just say, and the funds need to be expended by 2026, end of 2026. And I guess lastly, just as a financial reminder, the ARPA's one-time funding. So when we talk about having services and things like that, just what's the plan when the county funding with ARPA at least drops off? How would those continue to be funded? So I think that's all.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Yes, I know. If we continue with the spending, allocating the 1.5 million, that the other $500,000 would have to be put into a pot sooner rather than later, so that it can meet that year-end deadline. I just feel like we might need that at this moment in time. That just to hold back the $500,000.
Well, and that was the conclusion I came to during our goals and objectives day, was the fact that I'll support you as, being on the Coordinated Homeless Office board in your choice there. And we can be flexible enough in the next 10 months or so to get that money allocated.
The reason I advocated for us to put the full 2 million in now is that the more opportunity we create with this solicitation, the more and the better proposals we're going to get. I'm glad that that the county is open to our funds being used across a broad range of properties, not just our own. I appreciate the desire to create flexibility and not put constraints or priorities around helping us solve our problems. I'm okay with that. And I think that, putting the full $2 million on the table would make this opportunity bigger for more potential proposers to come in the door with a good project. At this point, I think it would be a signal. Putting $1.5 million on the table is a signal. Putting $2 million on the table is an even bigger signal. And with this whole process, we are dependent upon some already spread thin, overworked, but very talented and capable service providers out in our community, saying they want to take on one more new thing. So I just want to empower them as much as I can to be successful and to be interested in working with us on this.
And I want to remind my fellow commissioners that March 10th is the deadline for the short session. And I'm thinking that there's probably going to be some more state funding that can be commingled with our funding for what we're doing. So I'm not worried. I would be worried if we were going to say the whole 2 million was going to go. I really want to keep that $500,000.
Want to put that in a minutes motion? Is that what we should be doing?
Yes, that would be helpful.
So for the ARPA funds available, I would move that $1.5 million be available to the RFP process that the Coordinated Homeless Response Office is putting out.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? Commissioner Chan, Commissioner DeBonne.
I guess I do want to ask. So if I vote no, because I would rather see us put in $2 million, does that mean that well, okay, let me just play that out in my head. So if I vote no, we still at least putting $1.5 million in, but I get to express that I think that we should be putting the full amount on the table. Is that an accurate interpretation legally?
Yeah,
okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
No.
and the chair votes yes.
And that's more like the recommendation 2 or item number 2, where there's not parameters identified.
Right.
Yeah, and with the discussion previous, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, do we need any additional votes today?
No, that was it.
Okay, all right. So RFQ, let's hope we hear from some people in our community. Item number 11. Jen, it's your turn.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Jen Patterson, strategic.
It's still morning.
It's a very technicality, but
5 minutes to spare.
I am here today to go over the draft presentation. It will be pulled up in front of your screens. There's been a few edits since the last presentation was put in the board packet. So the most up-to-date one will be the one in front of your screen. And again, this is for the annual State of South Deschutes County breakfast being held in Sun River on February 27th from 7 to 9 a.m. The commissioners have been invited to speak. And so we have a draft presentation for your review. So we have just 5 slides here. We can go slide by slide and I can add in and make any edits or notes that you would like to see to these slides. And then, so on the very first slide, I apologize, my previous draft didn't get saved, but I'm going to change the title of that first one to say Annual State of South Deschutes County Breakfast, which is the title they're using this year, which is a little bit different from last year.
Okay.
Any other changes to the very first slide? Oh, great. The second slide, this is the one that's going to have the most changes to your packet. We got some feedback from Chris Doty and Tim Bronwell, excuse me, to put in some notes on the transportation system plan updates and the landfill siting. So planning for the future, we chose those two main topics. So I'll just pause to see if that's in line with what you want to present on under the planning for the future slide.
One third thing we could consider including on this slide is the Newberry Country Plan that
Sorry,
the Newberry Country Plan that, at least for the moment, is ranked pretty high in Community Development Department's work plan for the coming for this year, which is a planning effort specifically focused on South County. But we haven't finalized. I guess they haven't finalized that work plan, so I'm not 100% sure that that's going to stay in there as a priority for this year. But I would support it being in there, and but, I think it's in terms of planning for the future, it's something worth mentioning to the folks in South Deschutes County.
Well, yeah, does community development need clarity on our, stability on the work plan to put that in there or not? It's kind of we don't want to mention it, that it's the next project if it's not really coming this year.
I mean,
But
we could,
I support that also, I think, especially, Terrebonne's going to be, I think was the other one, right? There was two of them.
I mean, it would probably be safe to say that it'll be this year or next year. We could include it and
that's fine.
And specify that, we've got it in the work plan right now for this year, but if not this year, then next year.
And the Newberry Regional Partnership is going to be represented at this breakfast, also following us, so they can mention the fact that they're working on, community input, visioning.
Okay.
You want to put it as a large bullet item.
Okay.
Newberry Country Plan.
Great. I'll put one and then one sentence under there saying that we're looking to have it in the work plan for either this year or next year. I'll check with CDD to make sure that that language is accurate. So to fit it all on one slide, probably remove one of the sentences under the TSP update, or I can add in a second slide, planning for the future, slide 2.
Well, and then landfill siting, I would like to expand that a little bit in the transfer station update. So the message is for Southern Deschutes County is that Redmond is getting the big solid waste facility, like not landfill, and then couple 3 or 5 years from now, I guess we need to clarify, that's going to happen in Southern Deschutes County also, because just the status of that transfer station, the hours of operation and the fact that it will be there long term, and capital will be spent there to put in a transfer facility, the next generation. Because right now it's just open parking lot. We're going to
I did
update.
get expanded hours.
Yeah, but so a
Extended
little bit
days.
more information on that. So that may be a slide in itself. Landfill siting, which is the whole system, and then Southern Deschutes County's the status of that transfer site.
So I'll move landfill siting to a second slide, add in the transfer station update, and then also in this first slide, put in the Newberry plan and with a couple bullet points on there. And then can you see the notes on your slide deck there? Okay, so there's notes attached too. I will print those out so you can see them, and then I'll add a little bit more information, but we do have more information in the notes section of the slide as well that you'll have access to.
How much time did they allocate for us?
I did not get that specific.
Oh, really? And we get to be first?
Whitney, do you happen to know that? Okay. I have the agenda pulled up, which I believe is a notification we received from them. And it does appear, at least in order of what they say, that the guest speakers is first the county commissioners, then the Lapine City Manager, then the Newberry Regional Partnership, then SLED, and then Sun Rivers Owner Association. So that's currently what they have. And they have it from a 7 to 9 a.m. timeframe with presentations from 7:30 to 9, but they don't have specific time slots.
So yeah, probably 30 minutes is a safe estimate for the three of us.
Yeah, I would say probably, so 1, 2, 3, I would say probably 20 to 30 minutes.
So then
another way of packaging this would be to keep all 3 headings, just headings, no more text, and just put all the information that we're going to share in the notes on this slide. But I doesn't matter to me either way, but that
I can do either one, whatever the preference is there.
Maybe nice to spread it out so then each commissioner can pick a slide, you know, so
Right,
that's.
you each have one
the way to
topic.
go,
More
Yeah.
pictures. People love looking at pictures.
Great. I will add in one more slide, which will be dedicated for planning for the future, but for the landfill siting and the transfer station. And with a nice picture on there too.
Thank you.
Great. So now what will now be the fourth slide is the housing and land investments. We got updates from property management to go over the housing projects from 2023. Again, there's a lot of notes in here. I apologize that the notes aren't visible to you at this juncture, but there's specific notes on each one of these bullet points in there. And then also for the land donations in the notes, it talks about 4 separate land donations from 2013 to 2018 in the Lapine area. And it tells about the acreage and the location and the designation for those. And I'm happy to read that out too.
And I'm glad you added the foundation for affordable housing. So
Did you say from 2014 to 2018? Or
So the land donation notes is from 2013 through talk about 3 from 2013 through 2018 in Lapine.
why doesn't that?
Why doesn't it
run
go all the way
to
through?
2023.
Let me defer real quick to property management. Christy, are you? Sorry, she probably wasn't paying attention because she wasn't aware that this was going on.
Help.
Good afternoon. I can go back and confirm the information that I provided. I kind of outlined it, so I'd have to look and see what was pulled and included in the slides again. So I'm happy to look at that this afternoon.
We can add in anything additional that's relevant for the Southern Deschutes County there.
I mean, the 4 of the 5.02 acres for habitat were donations. So maybe if you just run up to, 2013 to 2022, and then, that one gets mentioned.
Yeah, I think
Or
I think I had that, but maybe it got pulled because it's just pending. I don't know. But we can confirm that.
But yeah, 2013 to 2022 would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot there. That added in for the land donations. And then are we good with what's listed for the housing projects? And again, in the notes, it tells detailed information about that.
What about rooted homes?
So rooted homes it's that 4th bullet point there, the 3.44 acres for housing works and rooted homes.
Okay, but the homes, could we separate that? Because isn't Housing Works apartments and rooted homes is like homes?
Yeah, so the notes to that particular bullet point say the county supported selling 3.44 acres on Huntington Road in Lapine at a minor discount to Housing Works and Rooted Homes to develop approximately 62 units of affordable housing, multifamily and single family cottages. And they anticipate the transaction closing this year.
It's an integrated project. So
Right, but the good news is they can actually buy the rooted homes. I think that's always important.
Yeah, let me add that into the notes.
Well, yeah, or whomever
Rooted
gets to
Homes
talk about
offers
it.
ownership.
Yeah,
opportunities.
ownership, love ownership.
Right. Okay. What will now become the 5th slide is the economic development. This side is pretty similar to last year. The differences in the notes, we updated the dollar figure amounts to be reflective up to date of the EDCO forgivable loan programs, as well as the amount of money the county has designated to EDCO for fiscal year 24.
one small correction on this slide.
Sure.
Economic development for Central Oregon. Is
Sorry?
Economic development for Central Oregon.
Get that changed.
And then I can check with Patricia Lucas from the SLED to see if there's going to be somebody mentioning other activities, because there's buildings being built and some businesses moving around in the business park. In fact, Jeff, so we'll have, I'll coordinate with some of that to see what we want to status or announce, or what, Jeff Wilslager, or if EDCO is going to be talking at all too.
Okay, great.
Because we could talk over some people's other announcements.
And we have a few weeks, so I will make the notes updated and send it around so you can see the notes in here. And then once we hear some feedback from our partners, I can add that in as necessary. Great.
Thank you.
The last slide on here will look pretty familiar. It's the legislative priority slides that we use a couple other times with the top 5 legislative priorities. In the notes section, I just put 1 to 2 sentences on each of those priorities that are similar to the language that we have used in previous slide presentations or updates.
And we'll be able to update it from the legislative stuff that we hear in the next week also.
Yeah, there'll be a lot going on between now and the 27th, so I can provide any sort of updates we have even, day before of this if we have concrete issues to update on.
When I see groundwater issues, I think of groundwater protection. So I don't know if my fellow commissioners see that. So, because this is a very personal topic that has been, discussed and studied for 30 years. So groundwater protection is the words I use. I don't know if you agree with that. That's kind of confirming. I'd rather see that on this slide.
There's no legislation around groundwater moving in Salem this short session at all. To the extent that there's anything state level, state scale that's happening on groundwater, it's around groundwater quantity, not groundwater quality. I definitely, based on the discussion this morning, I think it is very worthwhile for us to
maybe it's its own slide
to add a slide or
here we go.
But if the way that groundwater ended up on this legislative priorities list was around the state groundwater allocation rulemaking, which is significant for South County. Some a significant number of the wells that are going dry are in South County. Even though as we were just talking about, there's a whole lot of shallow groundwater there.
So I mean, we could
Those
get
were
real
drilled in
specific.
the 80s, according to the Mathers Drilling Company.
We could, groundwater or Water Resource Department rulemaking. I mean, let's get specific. We can, kind of just name it. We don't have to debate it or answer it, but name it.
I mean, do you think when this timing factor works out, I would think it should go on a separate slide.
Okay. Do you want it under legislative priorities or do you want just groundwater? We could put it under the planning side as well.
We could put it on the planning slide as well.
Planning would be good.
Okay. So the planning side will now have 3 slides in groundwater. Do you want to say issues? Or just
groundwater protection was the phrase that
Well, for legislative priorities. Yeah, I mean,
on this slide.
Yeah, let's kind of separate the two.
So
Is
are
there a discussion in legislative priorities about groundwater? I don't know that there is.
No, I don't. think there is
Again,
either.
there's not a
We don't even put it on there.
So we'll remove it from here and then I'll add a 3rd slide under planning for groundwater protection and then get some talking points from CDD on that based off of the discussion earlier today.
Please.
Okay.
Because I'm sure it'll be in the news.
Great. And then the last slide might be the easiest.
I don't know. I think you should say, thank you very much.
Oh,
I'm happy to add those 2 words. Yes.
You could make it in a whole 4-page.
So we'll touch this more as it gets.
Okay.
Great. I'll make these changes, get the notes version sent around to you. And then as I get feedback, continue to update it. And we'll do one more quick perusal before we go before the board or before we go before the breakfast on the 27th.
Okay.
That work for everyone?
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other items today?
Yes. Jen has 3 and Whitney has 1.
Shall I start since I'm up here?
Unless you want to go to the board, other item first.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So the first one is I'm just going to close the loop on the discussion we had at the board retreat last week when we brought up the camping feasibility study. At that time, there was a majority vote to move forward with the Visit Central Oregon Future Fund grant request that was due on February 16th. Based on some specific feedback I got on information needed for that grant request, I don't believe we're going to be able to have the documentation and the letters that we need in time to go for that. So I had individual conversations with the commissioners, and I believe at this time that the agreement is that we will not go forward with that VCO future fund grant request. It's due February 16th. So I just wanted to get confirmation in public that that is a position of moving forward or not moving forward on that particular request.
I support that conclusion.
So do I.
Great. And then additionally, in those conversations, one of the commissioners brought up a potentially moving forward with an RFP to see if there's any sort of private and or public partnership to move forward with a draft a road campground plan development of some sort. So just wanted to bring that up before the board to either discuss today or bring before the board at a future date.
I'd love to see that if there's any partners out there that want to take this and run with it. And we don't know that yet, but you know, how do we find out unless we put it out to the world?
That's fine.
And I'm not voting for it. So.
Okay, so at this time, there's indication for staff to look at opportunities to develop an RFP to see if there's a private partner out there willing or interested in development of the draft a road campground.
Yes. Okay.
So,
That also needs to be, I mean, we need to be very transparent about some of the current complexities, you know, the transportation concern, you know, transportation infrastructure concerns through the area. City has, you know, city has not yet expressed support for this project, things like that.
And then Commissioner Dare, what's your mindset on the project or us?
No, I know the city isn't supporting it, so I'm just respecting Jeff.
So like we don't have a project there.
Well, you have 2 votes for it.
Okay.
And I'm just like,
Yeah, so and
I don't really think so. I want the Affordable Home Foundation. I want them to go in there. I'm just not really sure it's the right place.
Okay.
You know, I've driven into the what is it? The RV park next to the Sisters Rodeo Grounds. Apparently that's the top end and it's really nice. And if we were going to do something, I would hope that we were going to do something nicer. So anyway.
Well, maybe somebody wants to do something nice and they'll be our private partner on that.
Well,
But yeah, I support studying it more there with a possible partner.
Great. Thank you. My next other items is one commissioner brought up wanting discussion of 2 bills, 1 House bill and 1 Senate bill. The first one is House Bill 4140, which appropriates monies to the Department of Justice to fund certain programs that assist victims of crime. So I'll leave that up to the commissioners for discussion. I have the bill pulled up and I'm able to provide additional information that's available through Bill Tracker, but I don't have the expertise knowledge on this particular bill.
And we might do this Friday, if not today, but
Right.
my message was that it was for, basically it fits for Kids Center. And that's, I think that's the bill. If it's the one I emailed you, it's the Kids Center and it would be kind of permanent funding for efforts like that around the state. So we can just prep that for Friday, just
4140.
4140, and then the second one is Senate Bill 1587.
and they may be companion bills.
And I have those on the Bill Tracker report.
Yeah.
So
as I said, that was just so we didn't lose that. That's
And it's related to this victim's crime also?
which I think is to say it's children and it's the main mission of Kids Center, which is a big fundraising effort in the community. But it's a need around the state. So my understanding, it's a bill that's talking about some level of reoccurring funding.
Okay. Oh, good. So that should be on our Friday morning agenda.
yeah, I believe there's 4 bills currently on the Friday morning agenda requested from the commissioners to look. So we have, we're going to be limited on time just for your information on the Friday agenda, because this is one where the legislators are joining us. So I put out a priority of list of bills to address. And the first one is the commissioners' priorities. So,
Yeah,
we
if
should
do
be
our
able to
homework
get
on
to
it,
the
we'll-
4. Yeah.
And the legislators might, we're good.
I'm going to be on a plane to DC by Friday,
Okay.
early Friday morning. So I don't think I'll be. It's possible that that's my layover in Salt Lake City, but it's pretty likely I won't be joining for the call.
So there was one particular bill, Commissioner Chang, that you wanted to talk about, I think on Friday, which was Senate Bill 1511, the Neighborhood Protection Cooperative Grant Program. So we're happy to bring that up on Friday or punt that to the next Friday.
If Kevin can gather some information on that and present it to the other commissioners, I think it's worth tracking. Essentially, this is a bill to provide resources through the state fire marshal's office to individual property owners to do to get defensible space done on their property. And I think any kind of state resources to support that work is a good thing. There's also parts of that bill that are specifically trying to get at getting the insurance companies, the insurance industry to recognize that work. So not just, providing some cost share assistance to property owners, but also then helping them convey, in a formal way, maybe, with the kind of sign off of the state fire marshal's office to insurers that they have gone above and beyond on their property, and they should get a discount for that.
Great. So I don't believe we're going to get to the natural resources bill this Friday, but I currently had this under the commissioners due to your prompt on that, but we should be able to get to it the following Friday. So do you want me just to punt that to the following Friday when we're going to talk about other similar natural resources bills, or would you like that prioritized for this week?
This week if possible. 'Cause
Okay.
they're gonna die if they don't.
I mean,
I'll keep it under the commissioners' priority.
Make sure it's a clear.
Yeah.
policy.
I mean, and Doug was in the loop on this as well. Hopefully he's going to do some homework for us.
Good.
Yep, great. And then Doug's also going to talk about if there's other bills on that tracker list that we can't get to, that's a priority. We'll bump those for our discussion on Friday as well. Okay. And then my third other item is it's kind of Commissioner DeBone's item, but it's that letter of support request for congressionally directed funding for the Lapine Fire Chief. So I'll turn it over to you.
So, and I've got the body of a proposed letter as provided by the here's for Commissioner Chang, and here's for you. The fire chief in Lapine. So Eric Holsey, new fire chief, asking for us to sign a letter for specifically to the senators for congressionally directed spending, which the conclusion we've come to in the past is, maybe not to support that specific ask, but I would support a letter in some form, maybe a little bit more generic, about the need for a fire engine with a ladder. So the city of Lapine has 3-story structures all of a sudden. The new clinic is going in with 4 floors. So there's going to be a need in the next, 18 months or so for a 2nd story or 3rd story capability. So I guess, I'm speaking to Commissioner Dare here when I say, how about we write a kind of a generic letter acknowledging the need and supporting anybody who wants to help them.
Yeah, I just saw in the news this morning, at 5, that, the state actually gave maybe 5 or 6 fire trucks, new fire trucks.
Yep, I saw that.
Okay, what was it? Camp Sherman?
Well, that's my thought process. Let's
No, I mean, that was,
letter of support to show that, yes, we agree with the need and it'd be good if they can get this
but
truck.
Lapine didn't get one? No.
I don't think, no.
No.
Well, and they just figured this out. They've got 3-story apartments and they've got a 4-story medical building going in.
Okay.
So I would propose that we write a letter of support and not specifically write it to their senators, but so they could include it into an ask for the senators and to the state, whoever may have resources for an agency like this. Because also, the fire agencies themselves have foundations and efforts where they, maybe it isn't a new truck, maybe it's the rotated truck out of somebody else. So
just to kind of get the bigger picture context of, kind of what Lapine Fire is doing to, get its fiscal house in order. Can someone remind me of the results of that operating levy vote that happened?
It passed.
Yeah,
and they've added another person to each crew, I think is the byproduct of that.
Yeah.
So they have more staff full-time.
And do you recall what the increase was, or what the what the numbers were around that operating levy?
No, I haven't put that in my head.
Well,
Commissioner Dare probably has it in her notes somewhere.
I probably have it in my notes somewhere. Yes.
you know, I really, I guess I would say I really appreciate that Lapine Fire, to open up its books and took a serious look and determined that to address the service needs that they have, that they should pursue that operating levy. I'm glad they pursued it. I'm glad it passed, and that makes me that plus kind of the resolution of all of the issues around emergency transports between St. Charles and Lapine Fire and the Lapine Community Health Clinic. That makes me much more sympathetic towards various kinds of supplemental funding requests for Lapine Fire. So I would support, I would be willing to sign on for this as a congressionally directed spending request, but that's
Well, as I say, that was the ask, but I'd like to make it more generic because there's multiple ways that they could use a letter like that. And it's just the Board of Commissioners in the county that this district is in acknowledging the need for, multi-story apparatus.
So in reading the letter, I could change it to whom it may concern and then just take out the 4 sentence there, fiscal year 2025 community initiative project application appropriations. But I think everything else in there in a quick glance through again today is generic, requesting a specific amount of money for a specific time period and with some figures, but not mentioning what or who the request is going to. Does that work for routing that?
I will only sign it with it going to the state. Because apparently those fire trucks that just came out, I thought they were from the state of Oregon. And I'm not asking any federal funding, and I've been consistent. I have to be consistent on that.
Yep, understood. So I'll sign a letter kind of to whom it may concern, generic, defining the need. And I would support them sending it to the state. So that's not our position. So
I'd be happy to sign on to a generic letter like that as well, knowing full well that they may very well turn around and try to make a congressionally directed spending request with it.
And ask you to carry it to Washington, D.C. on Friday, even maybe.
Well, I've got there's quite a list of requests from the region that people have brought forward. I'm not sure if I only can ask for 1 or 2 of them. Whether this would be
it'll be up to them to do it. That's fine.
Right. We need to spend more money in Washington, don't we?
Yeah.
That's an understatement.
We have a whole lot of critically important infrastructure
know.
and service investments to make in our region.
And what are we leaving for our kids and our grandkids but debt? So anyhow.
So do you have clarity on?
Okay, so I'm going to change it to the commissioner's letterhead, make it generic, and then route for signature. Great. Thank you. That's all for me.
Okay, so who's next? Whitney.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Excuse me. For the record, Whitney Hale, Deputy County Administrator. I have prepared a draft press release for the board's consideration in response to the vote that the board took this morning related to the declaration of emergency. I'm happy to take any feedback that the board may have on this draft. I put a hard copy up front during your break, but also in recognition of the time and the fact that you have 2 executive sessions still to come, can also connect with you offline on any suggested revisions that you may have on this. So really defer to the board on how you'd like to proceed, and also if you'd like to issue a release.
Yes, and this is all I did to mine.
Okay, come grab that.
I like all the content. My only thought was maybe the second paragraph from the end, and this maybe doesn't need to be done. This was my thought as I read it through. Bring it up in the set of paragraphs, but if somebody's going to read this whole thing, it's all there anyways. So I support it.
I'm making some notes and I'll
yeah, that's fine.
And then just for the board's visibility, Eric Brion is going to take that portion of today's meeting video and do a little editing, and we'll post that online. So we'll make sure that you get a chance to see that before that goes out, but just trying to help to get that word out into the community.
Great.
Thank you. Okay. anything else? Oh,
I got this one for you too, Whitney.
any other items?
This is just for us to understand next. So you're going to be back next Wednesday, Commissioner Chang?
I'll be here on Wednesday.
Yeah. So next Wednesday, we'll bring back the intergovernmental agreement for the core 3 organization. So just so you're thinking about this, the IGA is that transitional document between Deschutes County having some land, public safety agencies at the table, creating an organization that's under COIC right now with the intention of bringing it to a independent 190, probably, so that the future still needs to be defined, but that's going to come back. It's a document that'll be proposed to be put in the agenda next week, signing the IGA for this point in that transition.
You mean our $16.4 million worth of land?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Is that basically the scope of what the county is agreeing to in this IGA, is contributing that land, or is it broader than that?
Oh, it's the partnership. So basically all the agencies that are at the table, and it's the commitment of, we're here to make decisions. We're partners in this. There's an FTE formula to try to provide reoccurring funding. The tri-county agencies, we put up to about $1 million into the pot now by other fire districts and agencies writing checks in support of this future facility. So it gets into the business of funding and the structure of the organization. So the effort is getting everybody that's at the table to sign an IGA, just so we have a, common starting point. And you can read the document, as you say.
I'll plan to do that.
Okay. And then for me, as I say, I attended the Association of Oregon Counties meetings on Monday. The legislative meeting is one where we, really take the positions of AOC and then send our lobbying staff to the Capitol to communicate. There was also a reception, so legislators were there in the AOC building, so building those bridges with sitting legislators. I was able to go to the Capitol between about 11 and 12 on Monday, and then yesterday morning also. So I was able to just, kind of see a set of legislators, and I don't schedule hard meetings, so I just kind of go up and down the hall and say hi to folks. And it's good. It's good to be in the building. People are excited to see Deschutes County represented, and I know we can all do that. And I did talk with Doug for a while. Him and I met with a senator yesterday morning
You saw a
about core
senator?
3. Yeah.
Which senator?
Well, that's why it's slipping my head right now.
Is
No,
that
it's slipping my head.
Let me name all
Yeah.
30 of them. Okay, sorry. Mr. Chang?
I'll mention a couple things that have happened recently. Last week on Thursday, well, let me start by saying the Deschutes Cultural Coalition asked me to sit on their board. The review of applications, annual applications, was on Thursday last week. So I got to participate in the deliberations about which projects the county's $25,000 plus the state's $25,000 will be going into support a variety of our arts and cultural organizations in the community. We should be getting a list back from that, and for my fellow commissioners who are used to seeing those arts and culture grant applications every year, I can basically just say same groups, same projects, pretty much. A couple of new things, but a lot of what we are used to seeing. So in terms of those dollars continuing to support the kinds of projects that we have supported in the past, it's pretty good continuity. the Public Health Advisory Board met yesterday and talked about legislation. That's where I learned, even a little bit more about the medical examiner bill that's going through the legislature, and also about this EMS modernization bill that's going through the legislature right now. One of the big things that was discussed during the FAB meeting was the capacity needs at environmental health to conduct the inspections that we all depend on them to conduct to maintain the public health. And the environmental health group presented to the FAB that they're still carrying extremely high inspection loads per inspector with the rates that they have, and suggested to the FAB that they might be considering putting forward to the board an increase in the fees, kind of above basic cost of living allowance, which is the direction we've given them in recent years. An increase in the fees, particularly for food carts, mobile food units, just based on the amount of labor that it takes to do a food cart inspection and the complexities of ensuring sanitation at such a facility or such a operation. So, the FAB said that they were interested in supporting supporting environmental health in that budget ask. We didn't get to real specifics about numbers yet, but that expressed general support for environmental health, securing more resources so they can do a good job, and they can not have their inspectors carrying workloads 60 or 70% higher than what the FDA recommends. So there's that. And then last night I went to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife's mule deer, statewide mule deer management plan open house. They are moving towards adopting, having the commission, the Fish and Wildlife Commission, adopt this mule deer plan sometime in April or May, and are gathering input and feedback on the draft right now. There were a number of stakeholders who we interacted with quite a bit during the mule deer winter range overlay process at that meeting, and there was a lot of discussion about the various factors that contribute to the decline of the mule deer population. And the two leads on this project from the state office, kind of recognized state experts on mule deer, wanted to reemphasize to people that the importance of habitat for mule deer, and also placed a really big emphasis on nutrition, and link those two things together. So just so you're all aware, I mean, people asked about predation and cougars and highway crossings and habitat and poaching and on all the potential stressors. And ODF&W said, yeah, these are all important considerations, and the one that's foundational to it all is nutrition and habitat, because I guess there are researchers who are examining right now how basically undernourished or deer that don't have enough food are much easier to prey upon by predators. So it's sort of the interaction between habitat and predation. That's all I got.
Okay.
I've got my senator worked out here if you want to.
Who was
If
it?
you're ready to hear. So as I say, I was struggling with all the names in my head at the same time. So I was able to see Senator Linthicum, Senator David Brock-Smith, Senator Finley, Senator Hansel, Senator Knope, and I sat down with Senator Girard
Okay.
with Doug Riggs though to talk about the capital ask. So that was very strategic because he's on the capital committee. This capital ask for the city of Redmond, $1.78 million in support of the intersection improvements for the Oasis Village, future RV park and Core 3. So Gerard is the one that I was forgetting at the moment.
Okay. Very good. And I did talk to Representative Breeze Iverson's office, and I said that 1.8 million was our number one concern because that helps our property, that helps getting people off out of Oasis Village safely. Definitely that I said, please, we've got to get that funded. Yes, in case anyone in the room isn't aware, consumer debt is now over $1 trillion in the country. Did connect Jessica Vieira from Behavioral Health Board. She wants to work on grant funding. And so she's going to work with Jen Patterson because Jen seems to be an expert in that. And she needed some help for that. And then I was, I did see Emerson Levy when I was there for a brief second and did talk to quite a few people in both the House and the Senate. But that 1.8 million, I'm really hoping that we are able to get that for Redmond, and that will help our 45-acre property too. So it's the core, the 45 acres and Oasis Village. And so hopefully that'll happen. Anyway, I believe we do. I have nothing else. Eric, do you have anything else?
Just 2 executive session items.
Okay, so we need to leave then our filming to executive. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,